Blog Talk Radio.
The Chamo Afurakanu Afuraitkaitnut Neye AKANFO NANASOM Da Medinde Ojirafo Kwesi Ranehmta Akan Akwamamina Maruka Etifi Mu Ojirafo. Greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit. People meaning Africans, black people. Today is AKANFO NANASOM Day, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Ranehmta Akan. Ojirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America, in Ojiraman Mu, within the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast once again. We are opening up the chat room right now. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you have a question or a comment and you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a username, you can create one quickly in Blog Talk in order to interact in the chat room. So first we have a couple of announcements. Number 1, I say to everyone who came out on Minida on Saturday night to the Kokobo movement event. It was a great exchange of information. Of course, we were dealing with Kokobo. Dissexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kemet or our ancient ancestral culture, our culture in general. So we talked about eradicating dissexuality, homosexuality from the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community through ancestral religion. So, of course, we were able to give away a free copy of one of our books, Kokobo, dealing with the divine prohibition against dissexuality, homosexuality in ancient Kemet, and the various texts that we translate from ancient Kemet, proving, of course, that perverse, insane practice is not part of our ancestral culture. There's a divine prohibition against that as documented in the ancient culture, but of course as lived within our culture because we deal directly, experientially with the Abosom, with the Orisha, with the Vodou, with the divinities, with the ancestors and ancestors, with the great mother, Nyamewa, Amenet, and the great father, Nyame, Amen. We know exactly what is correct, what is incorrect, what is in harmony with order, what is out of harmony with order. There's never a time in the past, present, or ever will be in the future that dissexuality, homosexuality will ever be accepted on any level that is white, perverse culture that has nothing to do with our people. It is perversity, it is the manifestation of disorder at the highest level. We went through that information, gave away the free copies of the book to everyone who came out. We had a great exchange of information. Of course, we will be doing another event, the Kokobo Movement event. We've done 2 in D.C. We'll be doing them in different cities as well, in addition to our regular presentations in different cities on our various publications. We're going to put a link in the chat room real quick so you can get to the information we'll go over tonight, as well as just information in general. So the Homa link that we just placed in the chat room, our publications page, you'll find the Kokobo book there, as well as our other 16 books. So we have 17 books that we have published to date. All of the ebook versions are free downloads from the website. And then we also sell the softcover versions as well that range between $8 and $11 in discounts for any order of 5 books or more. So you can get to that information there. So yet I say again, once again, for everybody who came out on Memenada Saturday night for the Kokobo event, scheduling more events soon. We are, of course, when you look on our website, and let me put the link to that in the chat room as well. So when you look on this link to our website page, and we also have the same page on Facebook, the AKYISAN page, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religious Reversion. We're having our conference, which is coming up on March 20th. It's the first full day of the Fefel Bede, which is the spring. Fefel means beautiful. Bede means time in the Akan language, the ancestral language of the Akan. So Fateobere is a term for spring, the beautiful time. And March 20th is a Sunday, Awusida. It's the first day of the spring equinox. We will be having our AKYISAN conference, a Nananom Nshiamu and Ancestral Religion conference. The focus is AKYISAN, which is Ancestral Religious Reversion. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Ancestral Religious Reversion. We do not engage in conversion or transforming someone into something. We embrace real religion, and real religion is ancestral religion. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, all of these other pseudo-religions are not real, never have been, and never will be. The only real religion that exists is Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Ancestral Religion. It is various expressions on the continent and wherever we have migrated or were forced to migrate in the world, including in the Western Hemisphere, in the forms of hoodoo, which is the Akan tradition in North America, juju, which is the Yoruba tradition in North America, voodoo, which is the Fawn tradition of North America, Grigori, which is the Bambara tradition in North America, wherever we have gone, Obia in Jamaica, Winti in Suriname, the various expressions of our culture, ancestral religious practices, AKYISAN, Ancestral Religious Reversion. We're talking about reversion, returning back to our ancestral religious practices, our spiri-genetic birthright. So we're going to have an all-day conference. It will be from 11 a.m., 7 p.m., March 20th, which is on Awusida, a Sunday. Of course, it is a free event open to Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African Black people only. So when you go to the AKYISAN page, you will see the information. You'll see the trailer that we did, the video trailer we did for the event. You will see the flyer, and continue to check that page because the flyer will be updated on a regular basis. So far, we have four speakers. We're going to have about 7 speakers for that day, talking about different expressions of ancestral religion. We'll be presenting on the Akan tradition, AKANFO NANASOM, ancient authentic Akan ancestral religion. Have someone dealing with the Yoruba tradition, someone dealing with the Mbundu tradition, and so forth. So we're going to have a number of different individuals speaking on our expression of ancestral religion, born of our blood circles and carried within our blood circles wherever we have migrated or were forced to migrate in the world. So continue to check that page because the list of presenters will continue to grow until we get to that number 7. If you would like to vend at the event, we have a few spaces left. You can see the vendor registration application. It is there on the page as well. If you would like to place an ad in our book, AKYISAN, Ancestral Religious Reversion, we will be publishing a book, a journal for the conference. It will be given away free to everyone who comes to the conference. It will have articles dealing with various aspects and expressions of ancestral religion. Information about holistic health as well, natural health, natural healing, and so forth. In the back of the book will be a list of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions. So if you would like to place your ad, it will be given away to everyone who comes out for free. We will also have an online version of the book that will be placed on our website that anybody can download for free. So millions of people will see your ad if you place them in the journal. And then, of course, the softcover version, even after the event is over, we will be selling that book because it will be a book. It will have ads in the back as well. So anybody who purchases that book, the softcover version of the book, of course, they will see your ads and so forth when they receive the publication. So all the information about advertising, taking out ad space in the book is on the page as well. It's an 8.5 by 11 full magazine size book journal. A 1/4 page ad is $25. A half page ad is $35. Full page ad is $50. And of course, it will be printed in color. We need to get your JPEG files in for your ads as soon as possible so we can complete the formatting and begin the printing early so that we won't have any, just to cover for any, happenstances, so we can make sure we have everything printed up before the conference. So again, go to the AKYISAN page, and all of that information is there on the page. So we typically have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. On Joda, Monday nights, we have AKANFO NANASOM, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion. On Tuesday nights, we have Ojira, which means purification. We deal not only with the Akan expression, but Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion in general, talking about the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, which in essence is Ancestral Religion, and how it impacts every aspect of our lives. We seek to align every thought, every intention, and every action with divine order every moment of every day throughout the course of our lives as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. Incorporate law through ritual, and we restore balance to our lives, to our thoughts, intentions, and actions through ritual. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance are the expansive and contractive poles of Ancestral Religion. Through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject, to repel, to hate, to repulse, so that we can realign our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, and thus realign ourselves with order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance are the expansive and contractive poles of Ancestral Religion, of Nanasom. So we always say, of course, that Ojira, purification, operationalizes Nanasom. Purification operationalizes our ritual practice of incorporating law and restoring balance so that we can align every thought, every intention, and every action, every moment of every day with divine order. So this is what we deal with on Ojira Da Tuesdays, Benada Abanada Tuesdays for the Ojira broadcast. We deal with texts from Kemet and Kanat, Nubia, Egypt and Nubia, as well as our ancestral orature, oral literature, ritual practices wherever we exist in the world, showing how they impact every aspect of our lives. Our ancestral religion and purification impacts every aspect of our lives. Then on Awukuda or Akuada, which is Wednesdays, we have Egua Marketplace Day, where we bring individuals on who have established businesses, organizations, and institutions in our community, our people who are serving our people in a positive capacity and who have maintained their ancestral religious values, which inform their service to the community. We've had a number of individuals come on. We have, in that vein, we have published the Okom Economic Development Model. That is an economic development model rooted in our ancestral religious values, is therefore a holistic approach to economic development. When you look at the Okom Economic Development Model, you see that the strategy that we employ in the Okom Economic Development Model is to starve the beast and feed the prize. That means on a weekly basis, you make a determination about what funds you would have potentially wasted with the whites and their offspring at their businesses, and then you starve the beast and you feed the prize. You reallocate those funds away from the white businesses and direct them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks. We started last February, so we're getting close to that one-year anniversary of this. As a community, we do this for optimal capital infusion, focusing on one business per week, institution, or organization per week, so that therefore, if one person, of course, reallocates or starves the beast and feeds the prize, reallocates $10 or $15 away from Starbucks or McDonald's, Burger King, or wherever they have gone in that particular week, and reallocate that $10 or $15 to the business, organization, or institution of the week. That is a reallocation of resources from the white community, the whites and their offspring, our enemies, back to our people. When 1,000 of our people engage that process, that's $10,000 or $15,000 infusion of capital to a business in our community, which allows them to greatly expand their services to us, hire people within the community to work full-time, to support themselves, their families, as well as serving us at a greater capacity. So it's a win-win situation. All we have to do is make that simple decision to starve the beast and feed the prize, make that assessment on a weekly basis. If we do not do so, then by default, we are leaving that $10,000 to $15,000 in the hands of our enemies, and therefore we are financing our own oppression. when we engage the intelligent, sacred process of starving the beast and feeding the pride, we are serving our community. And then when that business, organization, or institution has received that kind of support and they're able to expand, then the following week after that, they can engage the process of starving the beast and feeding the pride and directing some of those resources to the next business, organization, or institution of the week. And it just continues. So this is what we're dealing with on the Okom economic development model. All right. And that's on, again, that is on Awukuda Afuada Wednesday night for Egua Marketplace. When you go to the Okom economic development model page, you will see the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions that we have supported over this past year, including the link to the videos of the broadcast where the individuals and organizations sat down with us and shared their information with us for 2 hours, took questions from the community and so forth. So, and for example, this past Egua Marketplace show, Sister Wabet Raven, the Shat Satheru, who is the authoress of Wachet Yoga, Understanding Serpent Power, talking about the practice of Wachet Ankh or Wachet Yoga, dealing with the divinity, female divinity, serpent power, Wachet, something received directly from Wachet and her ancestresses and ancestors that she put forward, just released her book. She is the business of the week since last Awukuda Akwada Wednesday to this Awukuda Akwada Wednesday. So you can still go to the link on the page, go to her page, purchase her book, go to her website, and all of that good information. All right, so let's get into this information for tonight. So the title of the broadcast, AKYISAN Ne Aru, the Ancestral Religious Community, Reversion, and Nation Building. So we're talking about the African or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Ancestral Religion or Ancestral Religion Community, Ancestral Religious Community, and AKYISAN. Now, AKYISAN, as we said, that's the name of our conference, but it comes from the term AKYISAN in the Akan language. Chi means back, return, back, or again, and sign means to return, to go back. So AKYISAN, return. The same term, Chi, in ancient Kemet in the Medutu, Chi means back, and sign in the Medutu in the hieroglyphs means return. So the exact same terms mean the exact same thing in the Akan language as they do in ancient Kanat, Nubian Kemet, of course, because we still speak the same language, and we're going to get into more of that tonight. So we've shown that in many of our books. So it's not an Akan term. We show the actual Medutu from ancient Kemet with the exact same meaning. It's simply that in the Akan language, we continue to use these terms and vocalize them properly. So whereas when somebody's reading the Medutu, and if they're just written out in consonants and they don't know what the vocalization is, we know what the vocalization is because we still use the terms with the exact same meaning. So AKYISAN means to return back. We're dealing with reversion, as we said. We do not engage in conversion. You only convert somebody into something that they're not naturally a part of. And you're trying to convert them into it. When we talk about reversion, we're reverting back or returning back to our essential nature, our spiri-genetic or transcarnational inheritance, that which we inherited through successive incarnations through our ancestral blood circle, every incarnation successive. This is what we're talking about with regard to ancestral religion. It is inherited ultimately from Nyamewa and Nyame, the great mother and the great father, the supreme being, called Amenet and Amen in ancient Kemet and Mawu and Lisa and Vodun and so forth. So we inherit our ancestral culture even before we enter into the womb. As ancestral spirits, ancestors and ancestresses in the ancestral realm before we are returned to the world, before our spirits are drawn into the womb of the woman in our ancestral blood circle who will become our mother, before us we as an ancestor or ancestors were drawn into the world. Before we were born, we were part of the community of Nananom Nsamanfo, as we call in Akan, or the Akua Akutu, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, title used in ancient Kemet. Before we entered into the womb, we were in the ancestral realm. Before we were drawn into the womb, we are drawn to Nyamewa, Nyameo, Amenet, Amen, and we're given a function to execute in creation. Just like every cell in your body is designed to execute a specific function within the organ and organ system that it is a part of, and therefore it is serving the whole body, we are encoded with the divine function to execute within the great divine body. And this is Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people only. We are cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being, literally. And therefore we have a specific function to execute within that great divine body that is infused within our spirits and our our soul, our divine consciousness. And that soul is a divinity that's attached to the head region of our spirit body, given to us by Nyamewa, Nyameo, Amenet, Amen. And then we are sent into a womb, ushered into a womb of our ancestral blood circle. We then take up a residence in that womb for about 40 weeks, and then we're born into the world. So therefore, when we are born into the world, we have already encoded within us a specific function to execute in creation. And that function, that set of, that blueprint or that set of instructions, that schematic, is supported by the energetic configuration that is assigned to us, meaning we have a specific divinity. Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, Ntoro, to divinities, Arusi, deities who are assigned to us. Divinities that govern our head, as well as our patriclan and matriclan. So we have the patriclan, Abosom, matriclan, Abosom, and Kadim Bosom, as we call in Akan. The divinity that governs our head, as well as the forces in nature that govern our patriclan and matriclan, which have protected and guided our ancestresses and ancestors for thousands of years. So that constellation of divinities comes into the world with us, and therefore we have a specific culture that we are born into the world with, specific inclinations towards certain behaviors, specific disinclinations from certain kinds of behaviors, because we are wired with a function. So therefore, when we talk about AKYISAN, to revert, return back, reversion, we are reverting back to our essential nature, our pristine state, our pristine condition, that which was wired within us by the Supreme Being and would normally have been cultivated within us by our family members in the community, but because our family members and just the community at large typically has been brainwashed by fake religion, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, Morishism, Rastafarianism, Kabbalism, Gnosticism, atheism, all this nonsense. And of course, atheism is another pseudo-religion as well, a white pseudo-foolish religion, extraterrestrialism, all of this nonsense. Since our people have been indoctrinated with this idiocy, then we typically are not being cultivated in our spiri-genetic inheritance, in our transcarnational inheritance. But it's within us, it's buried within us, it's woven within us, it's seated within us. So at some point, we begin to listen to our krawa, our soul, our divine consciousness, the ka, the kaet, that dwells in the head region. We begin to listen to that. We begin to follow that. We begin to listen to our nananom insamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circle. We begin to listen and are drawn and guided by the abosom, the divinities who were assigned to us pre-incarnation, who have been with us, and their energy has guided us throughout the course of our lives, even when we weren't paying attention. We begin to realign with them consciously. That is reversion. We engage a process of self-reversionalization and self-reversionalism. We did a broadcast specifically on that process of self-reversionalization. So, this is what we talk about. We're not converting into ancestral religion. We're reverting back to who we truly are, our essence, our nature. So this is AKYISAN. When we engage this process, of course, we are the Ancestral Religious Community, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Ancestral Religious Community. people who have engaged AKYISAN in the authentic sense. Whether you're engaged in the Akan tradition because that's who you are ancestrally and spiri-genetically, transcarnationally, meaning no matter what has happened with regard to mixture on the boats during enslavement, on the plantations during enslavement, all of that, as we say, well, tumi fra moja unso tumi and fra kra okra. The blood may be mixed, but the soul is not. The soul cannot be mixed. So if you were Akan in a previous existence, living on the continent, forced into enslavement, died during that time, waging war against the whites and their offspring, killing the whites and their offspring, major transition, your descendants may have grown up on plantations generation after generation or in free areas because they waged war against the whites and their offspring and freed themselves. There may have been mixture over the course of centuries, but when it's time for you to return and you're drawn into the womb of one of your descendants, you may be born with a lighter brown skin, which is a reflection of the wars that took place in the ancestral blood circle, a reflection of the pollution that took place over the past few hundred years. But you're the same melanin-dominant, same Afurakani Akan spirit or Afuraitkaitnit Akan spirit that lived as an Akan in the previous lifetime. You're the exact same spirit who has returned. So you're going to be naturally drawn to the Akan tradition, Akan language, Akan motifs, and so forth. If you were Yoruba in the past, you're still Yoruba now, notwithstanding the pollution in the blood circle, you're still that Yoruba spirit who has returned. If you're an Igbo spirit, you're an Igbo spirit who has returned. If you're a Basa or Fula or Fang or Bambara, whatever you were previously, you're the exact same spirit who has returned. And you are back in the world. And you're going to be naturally drawn to your culture. And if you were raised up in a community who doesn't understand the culture, your ancestresses and ancestors will lead you to your culture and confirmation of that. When you begin to engage in ancestral communication, spiritual communication, at the the ancestral shrine that you establish, and communicate directly and deliberately and consciously with your nananom insamam, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, which is that ancestral mandate that you're nationally inclined to do. You begin to learn exactly who you are. They remind you of who you are, what your ancestral family is, what your blood family is, spiri-genetic. Then you begin to incorporate that culture. That is reversion, ancestral religious reversion. You engage the abosom who have been connected to you pre-incarnation into the womb and been with you all your life. That is ancestral religious reversion. That is AKYISAN. So we're not converting into something, we're reverting back to who we truly are. Ancestral Religious Community. The Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Ancestral Religious Community. So, what we say is there's no resolution, which are two halves of a whole. The divine whole is Nyansa, or divine intelligence. The expansive pole of intelligence or divine wisdom is revolution. And the contracted pole of intelligence is resolution. When you have wisdom or intelligence, revolution and resolution, what you're talking about is going back. You're revolting or returning. Volve means to turn. Re means back, or again, revolve or revolution is returning. When the earth, Asase, moves around the Oriya, the sun, and returns to its point of origin, it has made a complete revolution, a complete return. When the earth, through revolution and its spinning, its revolutions around its axis, wields energy and transmits it through the various seasons and wields that energy throughout the planet. That is resolution, transference of energy for vindication, for reestablishment or resolution of conflict, bringing balance, returning order to disorder, eradicating disorder, returning order, and so forth. So revolution and resolution, returning to the source, revolting so that you can resolve. To revolt and resolve, revolution, resolution, you go back to gain power and wisdom, revolt so that you can resolve. Use that power and wisdom to bring order where disorder has manifested. These are the expansive and contractive poles of Nyansa, or divine wisdom, which is governed by Tuhuti and Sesha. the male and female deities of divine wisdom. So when we talk about revolution and resolution, that's what we're talking about. There is no resolution for Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, African black people that has ever been affected or ever will be affected in the future without our firm foundation in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestral religion. Our spiri-genetic birthright, all pseudo-religions and all of their forms, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, rastafarianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Vedanta, extraterrestrialism, kabbalism, gnosticism, hermeticism, sufism, etc., are the creations of the whites and their offspring. No black people created these foolish traditions. The whites and their offspring created these traditions. They're not African origins of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, and all of that nonsense. Or Buddhism. White people created these pseudo-religions specifically and deliberately to attack ancestral religion. That's the purpose of their existence, to try to destroy ancestral religion. They were not created by our people. We'll go into detail about that in the Kuku Tuntum. We proved that conclusively, because many of our people are misinformed on that, including some of our black historians and so forth. The same is true of various expressions of secular nationalism, atheism, another white pseudo-religion, secular pan-afrikanism, socialism, communism, secular-communalism. These pseudo-religions and pseudo-political ideologies were fashioned by the whites and their offspring and presented to us in blackface to thwart our move towards true revolution, resolution, and thus our achieving ancestral nation building restoration. That is the only reason these pseudo-religions exist, to assault our ancestral religions, because they know that is the source of our power. When we revert or engage in reversion, reconnect with the abosom, the divinities that came into the world with us, and empower us, and reconnect with the Nananom Nsamafu, our ancestresses and ancestors, our blood circles, and we're guided by them. We're guided by divine order. Our actions, our thoughts, intentions, and therefore actions are guided by them. We're not listening to the whites and their offspring and making decisions based on what rules they give us. We're listening to our own krawa, our soul, divine consciousness. We're seeking to restore order, divine order in every thought, intention, and action. And that is key, because divine order, as we will see as we go through our information, is comprised of two complementary poles as well. The expansive pole of divine order is ma'ah and ma'at, which is divine law. The male and female force of divine law and balance. Ma'ah is the male deity, ma'at is the female divinity. Law is the expansive pole of order. Law and love is the same word in our culture. Law is the expansive pole of divine order. Hate is the contractive pole of divine order. So through law, you incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities you need to incorporate in order to align with divine order. Through hate, you reject or you repel those things, objects, deeds, and entities you need to hate. You need to repel, you need to destroy, you need to exterminate in order to restore balance to your thoughts, intentions, actions, community, and so forth. So you incorporate through law, and you eradicate through hate. Just like you incorporate nutrients through breathing in through the respiratory system. You're pulling in oxygen, pulling in nutrients. Through the digestive system, you're pulling in nutrients through food and so forth. Taking in what you need to fuel and empower and strengthen your body, maintain your body. However, when you're pulling things in, you can also pull in toxins. If someone is coughing near you and has a virus, you can pull that in. You can pull in toxins from the environment. So then you have an immune and lymphatic system that destroys the toxins, kills the bacteria that would otherwise kill you. So you incorporate those things you need, and you exterminate those things you do not need that would otherwise disrupt the order. So the incorporation is through law. The eradication, extermination is through hate. The expansive pole of order is law. The contractive pole of order is hate. The expression of order is law. The impression of order is hate. When you understand the divinity of law, quote-unquote love, and the divinity of hate, and the divinities, the male and female divinities of divine hate, which are Benna and Abena and Akan and Ogun and Iyami Abeni and Yoruba and Heru Behudet and Sechima Sekhmet and Ancient Kemet. When you understand who these deities are and work directly with them, you understand hate is divine. There's a male and female deity of hate, male and female deity of divine law, expansive and contracted poles of order. So when we're talking about embracing divine order through ancestral religious practice, that means that we attune to our soul, our divine consciousness is dwelling in the head region that was given to us by the Supreme Being. That means we seek to align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with order. That means we seek to embrace divine order, which means embracing divine law, love, and divine hate. And when we operate in that fashion, we will only incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate that are in harmony with order, and we will seek to exterminate those things, objects, deeds, and entities that we need to exterminate for the preservation of order. That means extermination of our enemies, the whites and their offspring. So they can't have you practicing an ancestral religion that teaches you divine hate and the extermination of your enemies, extermination and eradication of all disorder, whether it's disordered behavior, thoughts, intentions, lust, and so forth internally, and the eradication and extermination of both external that will seek to bring that perversity upon you and wage war against you. When you have a divine prohibition against disorder and the purveyors of disorder, the whites and their offspring, as well as criminals within the community, then you only seek their eradication. And that is a religious conviction to exterminate your enemy, our enemy. The whites and their offspring understand they can rule people when they can learn directly from the deities to kill their enemies, kill those who seek to enslave and oppress them. You can't rule people when they have that kind of religious conviction. So they have to create pseudo-religions that teach you to turn the other cheek, that the whites and their offspring have chosen and all this other nonsense, so that we will not embrace divine hate. That's why these fake religions were created. That's why these pseudo-political ideologies, such as secular nationalism, socialism, communism, and so forth, were created to get us away from our culture, to denigrate our culture, to put our mind in a drone state so we just follow along with our enemies. And then they seek to blacken up these foolish ideologies to make it more digestible and lie about their origins and seek to put forth the false notion that our people created these idiotic ideologies, which we never did. So this is what we're dealing with. When we talk about true revolution and resolution, that is aligning with divine wisdom, which is the expansive pole of wisdom is revolution, the contracted pole is resolution. That is divine. That is part of our ancestral religion, to embrace wisdom, meaning to embrace revolution and resolution consistently on a regular basis. And that manifests within our process of ancestral nation building. When we engage reversion with the Ancestral Religious Community, or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Ancestral Religious Community. That is the key to ideological purity, which leads us to sound and effective revolutionary strategy. People talk about ideological purity. You can't have ideological purity outside of ancestral religion. When you're talking about purity, you're talking about order. When you're talking about order, you're talking about divine order. When you're talking about divine order, you're talking about the agents that undergird divine order. The embodiments of divine order in creation are the deities, the spirits that animate all of creation. So just like our physical bodies are dependent upon the earth mother and the mineral life and so forth within earth, plant life and nutrients within earth, our physical bodies are dependent on the waters of the ocean and rivers and so forth. Our physical bodies are dependent on the oxygen in the atmosphere. Our physical bodies are dependent on the sun, the energy of the sun and so forth, and the gravitational pull of the earth, as well as the moon, the other planets, the sun, and so forth. Our spirit bodies are dependent on the energy emanating from the spirits that animate the sun, animate the earth mother, animate the oceans, animate the rivers, animate the atmosphere, thunder, lightning, gravity, and so forth. So when we can attune, and only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African black people, can attune to the forces in nature, they only communicate with our people. They only possess our people. Notwithstanding these criminals who pretend like they're practicing ancestral religion, like white Cubans and white Puerto Ricans and so forth, who are not our people. No Orisha, no Vodou has ever communicated with them and never will. Never possessed them and never will. So, only our people can align with the forces in nature because we are children of the forces in nature. We are cells within the great divine body. Cells within the organs, and those parent organs are the deities within the great divine body of the supreme being. So because we can align with the forces in nature, just like your cell can align with its parent organ, we can attune to the forces in nature. That means we can attune to the embodiments of divine order in creation, because that's what the abosom are. They are the embodiments of divine order. They regulate order in creation just like your organs regulate order within your great body. We can attune to them. We can attune to that divine order. We can therefore draw in that order and replicate it in our community, in our homes, within our physical selves, our spiritual selves individually, within our families, within our communities, and replicate an orderly society, a civilization, a social order rooted in the divine order of creation. And of course, we are the only people who have ever created civilization, and only people who can, because we can create a social order rooted in the divine order of nature. And the only way you can create such a social order is if you can attune to the divine order in nature, meaning you can become possessed by the forces in nature that regulate order and maintain the divine order. You can attune to them. You can extract that order from them and replicate it in your own sphere of influence. So we have that capacity. So we can attune to that. And because we can attune to that, we can replicate order. Because we can replicate order, then therefore we can replicate and reestablish that purity in every aspect of our existence. We have ideological purity. Some people trying to seek ideological purity and trying to seek it by reading Karl Marx or some nonsense like that. Go back to your ancestral culture and stop fearing your own people, and deep down inside having a deeply seated and deeply seated self-loathing or self-hatred that's wired within you by the whites and offspring. So when we return to our culture, we have that capacity to manifest that ideological purity. We're the Ancestral Religious Community. And you have Negroes who have taken the term conscious and turned it into a very negative kind of term. Of course, you have agents in the community. There was a time when the word conscious simply just meant what it meant, which means aware. The whites and offspring saw that people were utilizing that term over 20 years ago, and it became more popular about over 10 years ago. So the whites and offspring sought to destroy the meaning of the term. So they put agents in the community. And of course, these agents are all over Facebook and YouTube and having presentations and debates and charging people for debates and all kinds of nonsense. Agents in the community to begin to misrepresent what conscious means with all kinds of idiotic notions, foolish ideas, incorporating all kinds of white ideology under the umbrella of the term conscious. And now when people hear the term conscious, they're disgusted with the term, because the first thing they think about are all these ignorant agents in the community who work on behalf of the whites and their offspring to destroy any measure of consciousness that will come from our people. And then you have the ignorant who go along with that and continue that process of misrepresentation. So you have people who start trying to incorporate all kinds of foolishness. They'll try to incorporate Hebrews, people foolishly referring to themselves as Hebrews. There were no ancient Hebrews in existence ever. They want to refer to themselves as Hebrews, no different than referring to yourself as the elves, and Santa Claus. Santa Claus and the elves didn't exist. If you want to call yourself North Pole Elvalite, you're identifying with a fictional group of entities who never existed. Call yourself Hebrews or Hebrew Israelites, you're identifying with a manufactured group of entities who never existed. So it's idiotic. So some people trying to call themselves Moors, which is idiotic. Of course, we have our book, Moor Means Dead, proving irrefutably that the term Moor means dead, which you identify yourself as a dead, mentally enslaved, physically enslaved, spiritually dead individual. You have people incorporating these kinds of foolish doctrines or pseudo-spiritualism, pseudo-kabbalism, pseudo-esotericism, pseudo-metaphysics, Hinduism, manufacturing connections between Hinduism and turning Hinduism in blackface, then calling it ancient Egyptian, yoga, and so forth. You have Negroes doing that all across the board, including all kinds of foolish doctrines, extraterrestrialism, the black man is God, black woman is God, all of this nonsense being woven into quote-unquote consciousness. So when the average black person comes in contact with somebody and they say they're conscious or they're in the quote-unquote conscious community, within a few seconds, they come in contact with other individuals who are spouting all kinds of idiotic doctrines, and they want to have nothing to do with it. This is all brought about by the whites and their offspring. So the agents all over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and so forth, publishing, writing, speaking, doing videos, that's all orchestrated by the whites and their offspring. You must understand that reality. But even prior to that, when we just utilize the term conscious, means somebody who's awake, somebody who's no longer asleep and going along with Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all of that idiocy. Conscious means you're awake, you're no longer asleep, you're no longer dead, resurrected, you've awakened, you've been revivified. So now you've returned to your ancestral religious culture. That's what conscious really means. Outside of that, there's no conscious. So we must separate that out. But even beyond that, that was just a descriptive title. It was just a general description, a general descriptive of people who have become aware of who they are. So they say, oh, well, this person is conscious now. But we need to be more specific. We can say, oh, well, we're in the conscious community, but in reality, we use the term the Ancestral Religious Community. When you talk about the Ancestral Religious Community, or more specifically, if you want to be technical, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Ancestral Religious Community, because the only religion that exists is Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African Ancestral Religion. So the Ancestral Religious Community, when we talk about being part of that, that means we're being operating out of our direct nature, out of our direct essence. That's the root of ideological purity. So let's deal with this whole notion. Let's deal with some definitions. When we talk about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African Ancestral Religion, and of course we've written a book, Afuraitkaitnut, the origin of the term Africa, proving that Africa comes from Afuraka, the title of the land, the Ka, the land of Afura, the creator, the Ka'et, the land of Afurait, the creatress. So when we say Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Ancestral Religion, or AAR, that is an acronym. But then that acronym also spells out a specific term. AAR, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, and then the U is plural. So when we use this acronym and it says AARU, the AARU community, or the ARA community, plural is AARU, we're talking about a number of different things. We can utilize that acronym just like some people say African Traditional Religion, ATR. Some people say African Ancestral Religion, AAR, which is more descriptive and more properly descriptive. We're going to utilize it properly with the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Ancestral Religion, AAR, Ancestral Religion. And then people who are part of that community, in plural, that would be AARU, ARU, the ARU, or the Ancestral Religious Community. In ancient Kemet, the term for that you, or the device that you use for plurality, the suffix U, or so-called W. So Ar, Ancestral Religion, Aru, Ancestral Religion Community. But then the U, there's the term Unju, or Unju, which means people or community in ancient Kemet. So the Untu or Undu or Unju means the community. AAR is the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Ancestral Religion, AAR, and then U, community. So the Aru is the Ancestral Religion Community. So this is what we're talking about. This distinguishes us, those who practice ancestral religion, born of our direct blood circles, from what other individuals are doing. Distinguishes what we're doing from misinformation, misinformed individuals, those who are agents, as well as those who are just following along with the agents are putting forth. because they're ignorant of what's really going on until they learn some information, until they come in contact with some accurate information. They're still promoting misinformation. So there's a difference between the Ancestral Religious Community and the pseudo-conscious community, as well as all these other different iterations of misinformation coming from the whites and their offspring that's practiced in blackface in our community. Just like there are groups of people, most people understand Christianity. Some people have done just a little bit of study understanding Christianity is not. Jesus never existed. There was no black Jesus. There was no white Jesus. He didn't exist at all. Fictional cartoon character. There was no Yeshua, Isa, Soko. No Yeshua Ben Pandera, none of that. So we understand. Some people don't understand yet, but they're coming to realization that Muhammad is a fictional cartoon character. We published that in the Cuckoo Tune Song. We were the first to publish that. So just like you have brainwashed individuals who are Christians, brainwashed individuals who are Muslims, brainwashed individuals who call themselves Hebrews, brainwashed individuals who call themselves Moors, brainwashed individuals who call themselves Rastafarians or extraterrestrialists or Nuwapians and all this other nonsense. We also have individuals who refer to themselves as socialists or scientific socialists or, simply nationalists, but they're secular nationalists, or they're pan-African nationalists, but they're atheists, or trying to separate ancestral religion from political ideology because they don't understand culture at all. And they're studying the work of individuals who didn't understand culture at all. And because they're studying the work of these individuals, and when those individuals make mistakes, and they're engaged not in heru worship, but hero worship, whatever the object of their worship, their hero says, they take it to heart, even if it's inaccurate, because they're engaged in hero worship, and then they dedicate their lives to a misunderstood principle because they're engaged in a misguided hero worship. We're not hero worshipers, we're heru worshipers, and heru worshipers, but not hero worshipers. So, in the same fashion, whether it's pan-African nationalism, secular nationalism, socialism, communism, all of that, atheism, all this other nonsense, those individuals are just as misinformed as the Christians, Muslims, so-called Hebrews, Moors, extraterrestrialists, and others. Some of them think they're really on board, but they don't really understand their culture because they're separating ancestral religion, which is the foundation of the culture. You can't talk about ancient Kemet and try to separate that from the ancestral religion, which undergirded everything that we were doing in ancient Kemet, undergirded everything we were doing in ancient Kanaan, Nubia, undergirds everything that we do all over the continent and wherever we exist in the world. And try to separate it, turn it into, well, these were just principles, they were not really deities, all that stupidity that comes from the whites and their offspring trying to take agency away from the deities, trying to attack the ancestral religion. And you have fools repeating that nonsense, talking about spookism and all that idiocy, which was popularized by Maulana Karenga, FBI informant. And, of course, you can learn all about him being an informant and so forth, working on behalf of the whites and offspring. He popularized this foolish notion of spookism over 40 years ago. So when people utilize that term spookism and utilize that as an identifier of ancestral religion, that comes from an agent of the whites and their offspring, an ignorant agent of the whites and their offspring who is an atheist. And so brainwashed Negroes began to utilize that term. And prior to Karenga, you had the Nation of Islam utilizing the term, we don't believe in a spook or a spirit, because it's an idiotic doctrine that they embrace and promote. They worship a white homosexual cracker, Fard Muhammad, called Fard Muhammad, as a deity, which is idiotic. He didn't want them to worship the deities, the goddesses and gods. When he comes along in the early part of the so-called 1900s, some of our people were getting more and more brainwashed with Christianity, and a lot of our people were involved in hoodoo, juju, voodoo, and so forth that we had been practicing. So then a cracker comes along and tells black people, don't believe in any spooks or spirits. No, you worship me, the white man. And so these Negroes began to work. They were used to worshiping a white man in church, so they just flipped that worship, that insane worship, Fard Muhammad, or one who called himself Fard Muhammad. So he wanted them to worship him, not the quote-unquote spirits, the deities, because then if we worship the deities, we would not listen to the cracker. So this notion of we're not into spooks or spirits comes from a cracker trying to destroy ancestral religion, to control the minds of our people. So whether it was popularized, 40 years ago, but it has inception going back to the 30s and so forth, it's still idiotic. So now you hear people saying, oh, I don't want to hear any spooky stuff or this spooky language, brainwash Negroes following a blueprint established by the whites and their offspring. If they think they're being conscious by saying, well, we don't want to get into any spooky stuff, that's idiotic. When you hear somebody say that, you're listening to a clown. You listen to somebody who has no knowledge of their culture. Doesn't matter how much red, black, and green they have on, how many books they may have written or read, or how many presentations they've done. It means absolutely nothing. They're promoting atheism or knowledge, misinformation, pseudo-knowledge, talking about spookism and all that other nonsense. These are clowns who have no knowledge whatsoever of our culture. So, but getting back to definition. So when we talk about this, so we're not just talking about the ones who Christians, Muslims, and all of that, also the secular nationalists, pseudo-scientific individuals who really have no understanding of what science really is, because it's really born out of our culture and still connected to the deities, the forces in nature that govern creation, including divinities like Ptah, who's fashioning the world at the core of Earth and the core of all planets and stars and so forth, the great engineer, the master craftsman. This is a force in nature that we directly learn science from. So science is still connected to a force in nature that we communicate with and we learn from. So, again, we're not just talking about the pseudo-religions, also the pseudo-political ideologies given to us by the whites and offspring. So let's get into some definitions when we talk about the AARU community, pluralize the AARU, Ancestral Religious Community, AARU, Ancestral Religious Community, or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion Community, and then the plural, AARU, the AARU, the community, the people. But that's AARU is also an acronym, and it's also spelled out a word, AAR as well as AARU in the plural. So when you look in the language of ancient Kemet, we'll look at what that word actually means and what it has to do with us as an ancestral religious community and what it has to do with reversion, ancestral religious reversion. And when we engage in ancestral religious reversion, then we can properly engage in 7 principal values of nation building: methods of food production and preservation, methods of curing disease, establishing a military structure for the defense of our nation, perpetually establishing institutions, training institutions, cultural institutions, religious institutions, and so forth, to transfer knowledge of manufacturing and medicine and agriculture and engineering and everything else, and religious practices and so forth, establishing institutions, establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence, building homes on acquired land, and the manufacturing of clothing. These 7 principal values of mindset you are undergirded by the abosom, the forces in nature that govern these activities. And when we fully embrace ancestral religion, we are engaged in that process. When we fully embrace ancestral religion, nationalism in the true sense is inherent within that definition. Nationalism and pan-afrikanism in the true sense is inherent within the definition of being Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African, when you really understand that. So when our people don't have proper definitions because they foolishly believe that Africa comes from a Roman general, which is totally false, but there's other ridiculous definitions that we've proven false in our book, Afuraitkaitnut, The Origin of the Term Africa. When you don't understand your identity based on your culture and cosmology, then you come up with all kinds of foolish ideologies to plug in the empty spaces. So let's look at these definitions. If you look at the term in ancient Kemet and the acronym, so we're using this acronym AAR, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, R, and then the plural AARU, which is the community, R in ancient Kemet. And for example, we're going to show the term in ancient Kemet, but then the exact same term in the Akan language, so you can see that they're still used and the vocalization is proper. So for example, if you look in Budge's dictionary on page 65, so you see AR, but then you also see the variation is ARI, AR or ARI, What does it mean? It means to make, to do, to create, to form, to fashion, to beget, to produce, to pass the time, to be made, done, created, etc., also used as an auxiliary and so forth. So to make, to do, and so forth. Now, ad, and very often adi. Let's look in the Akan language and see if we have a term which means the same thing. If you look in the Asante Fante Dictionary, published first in 1881, then the revised version in 1933 of 12,933, you'll find that di or adi definition means to make, to be active in a general way, in word, in deed, to exercise or practice some manner of dealing or to exhibit or display some quality or character, to act, to deal with, to make or to act, to do. Just like ad or adi means to make, to do, to form, to fashion, to do something, to be active. In ancient Kemet, adi, and then adi in Akan, to make, to do, to be active in some specific fashion. Let's give another definition. Adi also means to amount to in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs, to pass the time. Adi, so you're making something happen, you're amounting to something, you're passing the time. So then you look in the Akan language. Adi means to spend or live or last a certain time, to spend or pass time. So you're spending time or passing time, you're making something happen, you're utilizing time, you're acting on time, you're forming time, you're making something happen. So just like in ancient Kemet, adi means to make or to do, to be active. In Akan, adi means to make, to do, to be active. Adi in ancient Kemet means to pass the time. As in, I passed 8 days in exploring. That's in the hieroglyphic dictionary. In Akan, adi also means to spend or live or last a certain time, to spend or pass time, to remain. As in, he passed or stayed 10 days there. He made 10 days there. He passed 10 days there. He made something, he utilized or exercised or utilized the time for a number of days. Another term in ancient Kemet, adi and adiao, which means to occupy an office, to enjoy a dignity, to exercise the functions of a certain office. That's in the hieroglyphic dictionary. In Akan, adi, to have or occupy a place, a rank, or order, to exist somewhere, to be, to dwell, and that's, once again, to occupy a certain office, to exercise a certain function of a certain office. So we're showing the exact same term with the very meaning, all the meanings, of course, are related, talking about to use, to take, to act, to make, to do something with the time, to do something with what you're creating, you grasp something. When you look at the open, when you look at the eye open, it's in a ovular type shape. It's in the same shape of an open mouth. So when you see the medut for an open mouth, which is the symbol for the letter R, then you look at the eye. When the eye opens, it has the same shape of when the mouth opens. That's why adi can also mean to consume, meaning to eat or digest. Because when you open your mouth, of course, you consume air, but you also consume food. When you open up your eye, it takes the same shape as the open mouth, and you're also consuming light and consuming that which you see. Your vision is consuming or taking in something. So those symbols are directly related because they're directly related to functions within our body. Now, let's get into a couple of other definitions of adi. Ar or adi. That's AAR, Ancestral Religious Ari. The plural, aru. You add the U on, that's the plural. Just like adding the S on in English, you have can or can. That's the plural. Ar, to create or do. Aru, aru, those who create or those who do, to make something happen and so forth. Also workers, doers, those who make. Aru. If you look at, and then with the T, ar, which means that which is created. That's the noun version. Aru, and ar is the verb, to make, to do, to create. Art, is the noun which that which is made, that which has been made, that which is created. Aru is plural. Those who do, those who make, those who create, they're workers, they're makers, they are doers. Arut are those who have been made, those who have been worked, those who have been created, creatures, those who exist. Then you have the term Aru with the capitalization, showing a symbol of a sacred mummified being, and it says form or figure, image, ceremony, rite, and so forth. Aru, the divine forms in the dua, the ancestral realm. That's the plural. So when we're talking about the Aru, AAR, ancestral, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religious, you, community, or plural group, those are the people who make, to do, to act, to function. But then the divine form in the dua, because we are ancestors and ancestors who have returned. So we're engaged in ancestral religion, making or doing something in harmonious order. Also Ari. Ari also is one of the 14 Kau or souls of Ra. That's another title for that. Now let's look at a few more definitions in the language. Also means to have, to possess, contain, to be active in some occupation, to be active in some office or capacity, just like we said before, to have a certain office, act in a function of a dignity or a certain rank. In Kemet, means the same thing in Akan, to act in a mutual engagement in a friendly way, to be mutual in relation. It also means to be active in some way or other concerning other persons, talking about our people, to be active in a general way in word and deed, to exercise or practice some manner of dealing, to exhibit, display some quality or character, to proceed, act, or deal with, to practice habitually, talking about ritually, to observe an injunction, a promise, a law, to observe some manner of doing. And this is when you talk about observing some manner of doing, it means to take, to grasp, to possess. That also shows the open eye. When you open your eyes and look, you're grasping or possessing or taking something in. So when it says to observe or to observe an injunction, to take in an injunction, to operate upon an injunction, to possess an injunction, a law, and so forth. This is why also in ancient Kemet, you have the term Ari, which means he who belongs to something or someone, one who is in charge, a keeper, the man whose duty was to attend to something, a watcher, a keeper, that which appertains to someone or something, the duty of someone, office, appointment. So the keeper, the watcher, the one that takes hold of a situation, a specific injunction, a specific law to keep or to hold or maintain. Those involved in ancestral religion, the Aru or the Ara community, keeping and holding law, divine law, order, and so forth, keeping those injunctions, keeping those laws, keeping those quote-unquote promises and so forth for divine functions, exercising specific acts, manifesting specific character, always dealing with in harmony with divine order, to be active in some occupation, to transact or negotiate some affair, to negotiate, stipulate, or make an agreement. All these different things have to do with Ar or Ari. And then we have a couple of more things. Hold on one second. We just want to flip through real quick. Of course, it means, as we said earlier, to take, to receive, to obtain, observe. And there's just one more section. To meet with experience. We're talking about direct experience. It can also mean to fight, to attack, to exist in a certain number. And there was one more, to be active inwardly. So, for example, Ori ne tirim, he meditates, ponders, resolves in his mind. He musters resolution or courage. He ventures, he takes pain. So that's talking about to act inwardly. So acting inwardly, habitually, taking possession of something, taking possession of knowledge, taking possession of wisdom, taking possession of different things so you can act in a harmonious fashion inwardly, as well as outwardly, to make something, form something, to hold on or possess certain laws, injunctions. All of these different things are Ari in ancient Kemet and Akan, as well as Ara. And then the plural are the people who engage that are the Aru. That's the Ancestral Religious Community. And of course, Aru is also a title of a class of beings in the ancestral realm. Ari is also a title of one of the 14 Kau, or souls of Ra. So when we talk about we are the Ancestral Religious Community, we can properly say that's a proper designation in reality for the quote-unquote conscious community. But we're more direct and more deliberate. When you engage in ancestral religious practice from an authentic perspective, you're already naturally operating in harmony with who you are. You're operating as a member, as part of your nature, the Ancestral Religious Community, as Aru, as part of that Aru, the Ara community or the Aru. Now let's get into a little bit more detail with regard to that cosmology. And we're going to put a link in the chat room real quick and delineating the differences between what's going on. If you look in our book, Maranechi, Divine Law, Love, and Divine Hate. So we talked about what divine law or love, law and love is the same word. We proved that etymologically and conceptually in our languages. Divine law and love is the same word. So divine law or love is the expansive pole of divine order. Divine hate is the contractive pole of divine order. And in our book, we trace the etymological origin of the term hate. It does not go back to Proto-Germanic or Proto-Indo-European roots. It goes beyond that. The het, meaning to break or destroy or destruction in Proto-Indo-European languages, goes back to ancient Kemet. The term het, or chi, means to break or destroy, and it shows the medut, the hieroglyph of a man with a stick breaking or destroying something. When the cracker saw that, he just repeated it. Chi, or chi, pronounced chi or chi, becomes ket in Proto-Indo-European. In Greek, it later becomes ketdos, and then in English it becomes ket or hate. But the Proto-Indo-European root, they will say, just means destruction or to break or destroy, but they don't know why. The sound ket or ki means to break or destroy. They just know those sounds mean to break or destroy. In our language, it means the same thing, to break or destroy, to hate, to reject, to repel, to break, destroy. It means the same thing in Akan, chi, or ki, to hate, destroy, repel. But we have the origin, the cosmological foundation, because we have the image of the man with a stick breaking or destroying something. And then these titles are also part of the names of the deity of divine hate, Heru, Behudet, and Sekhmet. So we have the cosmological foundation that birthed the term. The cracker just has a remnant, a fossilized remnant of some sounds with a definition, but they don't know where the sounds come from. We proved that in the book. So when you get to that book, when you go to section 5 in the book, Maranechi, Divine Law, Love, and Divine Hate, we delineate the differences between these informed pseudo-ideologies and our actual culture. So you get down to page 40, no, get down to page 50. And we talk about the beginning of the corruption of the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African worldview. When we talk about Afrocentrism, being centered, Afuraka, Afuraikai, and if people don't understand where the term Afuraka, Afuraikai actually comes from, then you can't be centered in it if you don't know where it comes from. And until we publish that information and show that Ka doesn't just mean soul, Ka, soul for a male, Ka-et, soul for a female, but Ka, specifically when talking about the land, is talking about a raised land, a mountain, hill, raised land, Ka, or Ka-et. Is also defined as the specific raised land, Ka, that Ra descended upon, as well as Ra'et descended upon at the creation of the universe, the primordial mound that rose up out of the primordial waters to be the first landmass of earth. That is the primordial Ka. And Ra, under his form as Afura, moved through the primordial Ka. And when that spirit of Ra moved through the primordial Ka, the primordial raised land or mound, then that was the Ka of Afura, Afuraka, the land of the Creator. And when Ra'et and Afuraet moved through the first Ka'et, the feminine aspect of that raised land, then it became the Ka'et of Afuraet or Afuraitkaitnit. So Afu means flesh, Ra and Ra'et means the creator or creatress, that divine living energy, a portion of which exists within Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people only. So that's divine living energy, the spirit, the bond by it within our people, within us. And then Ka and Ka'et not only means the raised land from which our primordial, the bodies of our primordial ancestors and ancestors were fashioned from, but Ka and Ka'et also means soul or divine consciousness, the deity that dwells within the head region. And within that soul or divine consciousness is encoded, as we said, the divinity, that divine function we are to execute in creation. It is your spirit's brain. Just like you have a physical body with a brain, a smaller body in your head region that regulates order in the large body. That's what the brain is, a smaller body within your greater body that regulates order within your greater body. In your spirit body, your sahu or your sumsum, you have a spirit organ, a spiritual brain in the head region of your spirit body. That is the Ka or the Ka'et. It is an entity, it's a deity that dwells with you and guides you up throughout the course of your life. And when you engage in ritual practice, you can communicate with that deity. A male divinity if you're female, a male divinity if you're male, a female divinity if you're female. And we communicate with that deity, and it pulls us in the head region throughout the course of our lives. When we align with that pull, we live in harmony with order. When we go against that pull in the head region, then we create disorder for ourselves. That is a force in nature. And when we develop the relationship with that divinity that was assigned to dwell with us by the Supreme Being, is a messenger of the Supreme Being that dwells with us throughout the course of our lives. When we develop that relationship, we can see that divinity and communicate directly with him or her. Just like we communicate with other deities, Orisha, Vodou, Abosom, and so forth as well. So encoded within the Ka, the spirit's brain, is a specific function you got to execute. Just like in your physical brain, encoded within that are all the functions your body is supposed to execute. So, it is a worker. As a matter of fact, when you look at the image on, and we're going to get into this in another broadcast, when you look at the image that we use for the show, it's actually the I or the Ar or Ari, and then the symbol for the two arms, the Ka. So it says Ari Ka, which means the maker or doer, Ari of Ka, the divine work or labor. So we're talking about divine work, engaged in working, making, creating, doing the divine sacred work, divine function, mission that's given to you by the Supreme Being. That Ari, Arika, in Akan becomes Adinkra, the Adinkra symbol, and we're going to get into that in another broadcast, but we show that information because we want to show the Ka, the soul, and Ari, which represents the Ari or Aru community, the Ancestral Religious Community. So wired within your soul, your divine consciousness, your spiritual head is the function you have to execute in creation. That's connection. That's part of the Ka of Afuraka, but then the other part of Ka, the critical piece with regard to the landmass, is the first land to rise up out of the primordial water. And we show that in the Medusa, the primordial Ka, in the region of what is today called Kemenu or ancient Kemet. Today they call it, Hermopolis by the Greeks, but that region of Kemenu, the primordial mound rose up in the region of Kemenu. That's why they call it the Ka within Kemenu, or the raised land within Kemenu, in the region of Kemenu. And that's where Ra operated through at the beginning of creation, Afuraka. And we show that in the Medusa. And our book is the first to show that in the Medusa, proving that Afuraka is the origin of the term Africa. So when you understand Afu, flesh, and Ra, the divine living energy, and Ka, the soul, but also the primordial land, Afu, flesh, Ra'et, the divine living energy, the Bayat, and Ka'et, the soul, the divine consciousness, female, but also female aspects of that original land. Then you understand to be Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit is to be connected to the great Ka and Kayat, which are two divinities, as well as Ra and Ra'et, the divine creator and creatress. The creator and creatress, Ra and Ra'et, are grandchildren of Amen and Amenet, the supreme being. And they are functionaries and subordinate to Amen and Amenet. There's a difference between the creator and creatress and the supreme being. And of course, the crackers don't teach that. And many of our people who are scholars and so forth, they don't understand that either. So they simply repeat the misinformation of the whites and offspring and say the creator is one and the creator is Amen or Pata, and that's totally inaccurate. So we make those delineations between Amen, Amenet, Ra, Ra'et, Pata, Sekmet, Ka and Kayat, Hehu and Hut, Nun and Nunet, Tehuti, Seshat, Ma'al, and Ma'at, and all the way across the board. So when you're African-centered, then you're centered in Afuraka, Afuraikai, the flesh, Afu, Ra, Ra'et, the creator and creatress whom we communicate directly with, who possess us, communicate with us through divination, and Ka and Kayat. Ka and Kayat is not only the raised land, it is the divinity within the head region, but also the black substance of space is governed by the male divinity called Ka and the female divinity called Kayat, the great divine soul of Amen and Amenet. So we deal with all of that in the book Afuraka, Afuraikai, as well as in the book The Okra Complex, the Soul of AKANFO. So all of that cosmology is important to understand when someone says, I'm Afrocentric or African-centric. So most of our people do not understand that. Even those who are proponents of Afrocentricity who are published on that, they didn't have that information, including Malefi Asante and others, so they didn't understand that etymological origin of the term. So their definition of Afrocentricity or African-centeredness is therefore lacking. So we bring proper information to give a full perspective, a full cosmological foundation for Afrocentrism. We did that in a broadcast. We can go over that, but we're going to get into some of it here. The beginning of the corruption of the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit worldview. The whites and their offspring, the AKYISAN, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, divinely hated, that's what we use the term AKYISAN, began to solidify a deliberate perversion of concepts, ritual practices, symbols, worldview, and more in a major way after the Greek invasion of ancient Kemet. This began about 2,300 years ago, followed by the Roman, Arab, and other European invasions of Kemet and the white Aryan invasions and occupation of the Harappa Valley, ancient black India. These perversions continued as some Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut were captured and were enslaved and accepted the pseudo-religious practices of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Gnosticism, Kabbalism, Sufism, Hinduism, Vedanta, Buddhism, etc. These cosmological perversions were crystallized as we accepted them. As some of us migrated from east and north Afuraka, Afuraikai to central, west, and south Afuraka, Afuraikai, after the fall of Kemet and parts of Knesset or Kanit, Nubia, to the Greeks, Romans, and Arabs, as well as the fall of the civilizations in northwest Afuraka, Afuraikai to the Romans and Arabs, a small percentage of our people, a small minority percentage of our people became carriers of these perverse beliefs, these corruptions that have been crystallized within them like fragments of Gnosticism, Kabbalism, Sufism, Christianity, all this nonsense. Some of our people migrating away to west and central Afuraka, Afuraikai. The vast majority of our people didn't have anything to do with that nonsense, but you have a few who carried those corruptions within them. They became carriers like a disease. These perverse, and it's over 2,000 years ago, these perverse beliefs would infect the proper notions of the physical world, the spirit world, and the nature of reality within a small segment of the population. The central theme of the cosmological corruptions of the AKYISAN, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, is the corruption of proper notions of Maranechi, divine law and divine hate. That's their key. They want to destroy proper notions of law and hate, divine order. If they can destroy that with cosmological perversions, then they have you. They've got it. Those are the two complementary poles of Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe, or divine order. we previously addressed the identification of Ma'al with Ma'ar, law and love. In this section, we address the proper notions of Mara, as well as corruptions of Mara or law by the Achiwadiefo. So first we go into some details talking about the concept of order and good are the same concept. So we go into some detail about that. We say, Divine Wisdom Teaching in Akan. Osansa se adye a nyame aye nina ye. The hawk says that all that nyame wa did or created is good. This shows that all things that came into being from the Supreme Being were created in harmony with order, and good is the same word and the same concept. So everything that was created by the Supreme Being and directed to be created by the Supreme Being is good or order. There's no such thing as good and evil are two halves of a whole and part of a divine continuum. That's idiotic. They're not the balance of one another. So we go into some detail about what are true complementary balances. Yes, male and female, hot and cold, expansion and contraction. But good and evil are not two halves of a whole. Good and order is the same word and the same concept. So everything that was created by the Supreme Being, directed to be created by the Supreme Being, is created in harmony with order or good. So the opposite of good means the opposite of order. What is the opposite of order? If you have, as we show in the book, some clay, it is unformed or unordered. If you move and form the clay into a pot or a jar, now it went from being unformed or non-ordered into an ordered state. Just like the black substance of space was unordered, it's a plasma, Ka and Kaet, and a portion of that was fashioned into the bodies of stars, which would later give birth to planets and so forth. So it went from a non-ordered state to an ordered state, an unformed state to a formed state, under the direction of the potter or potteress. Non-order is the opposite of order. Now, if someone came along and saw the pot that you fashioned and took a hammer, broke it up, and destroyed it and scattered pot shards all over the floor, that is disorder. That is a perversion of the order. It's not the balance of the order, it is a perversion of the order. Disorder is a perversion of the already created order. The balance of order is non-order. The unformed clay goes naturally and divinely from unordered or unformed and non-ordered to order. That is a sacred balance. Then a fool comes along and destroys the ordered piece that was not under the divine sanction of the potter. So therefore it is disorder, meaning it is evil. Evil is a corruption of order. It's not the balance of order. Negroes who follow the whites and their offspring would say, well, all things are part of divine order and good. You have to have evil, and if you don't have evil, you can't have good. All that is idiotic. We're repeating the foolish pseudo-philosophy of the whites and their offspring and trying to make it Afrocentric, which it is not. When you understand cosmology, you understand the difference. The deities never sanction disorder. They repel disorder. So when someone engages in disorder, there are deities in creation that will destroy them and eradicate. When cells get out of pocket and start acting out of harmony with order, that means they're out of harmony with order. So the immune system cells are designed to go and kill them to restore order. Disorder is not the perversion of order. That's like saying you have an Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnut woman, two halves of a whole. They balance one another out. Ra and Rahet balances one another out. Amen and Amenet balance one another out. Ma'al, the male deity Ma'al, who we communicate with and invoke and engage in divination, he balances out the female divinity Ma'at. If you don't know who Ma'at is, then you have no knowledge of who Ma'at is. And most of our people who have been repeating the misinformation of white Egyptologists, try to blacken it up, have no clue as to who the deity Ma'at is, because they didn't learn that from their quote-unquote historians and Afrocentric theorists and so forth, because they were simply repeating the misinformation of the whites and their offspring. They were not part of the AARU or the Ara community. They were not part of the Ancestral Religious Community, so they couldn't communicate with Ma'al and Ma'at, or they ignored the natural communication they would have had because they're white scholarship didn't allow them to pay attention. What they call spookism or some nonsense like that, so they don't know the deity Ma'ar. Even though he's always existed in ancient Kemet, he's in the text, but they don't pay attention to him because white people don't pay attention to him. So then they create all these concepts of Ma'at and writing books about Ma'at and everything else, and they have no clue to write a whole book about Ma'at, hundreds of pages, and don't mention the deity Ma'al one time. And Ma'at is about law and balance, and you don't even mention the deity of balance in your multi-layered book about Ma'at. That's insane. But it's a manifestation of not being part of the AARU, the Ancestral Religious Community, and just following the whites and their offspring in blackface, whether intentionally or unintentionally, wittingly or unwittingly, and then promoting misinformation, wittingly or unwittingly, for decades in many regards, many respects. This notion of evil being the balance of good is totally insane. Just like you Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnit woman, the balance of one another. The balance of the Afurakani man is not an Afurakani man with a broken leg. That's a perversion of the man. It's not the balance of the man. The balance of the man is the Afuraitkaitnit woman, and only the Afuraitkaitnit woman. Not another man. We're not into dissexuality. That's insane. And, of course, not any other race. Only the Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnit woman balance one another out. Anything else is perverse. So, the balance of an Afurakani man is not an Afurakani man with a broken leg. The balance of order is not disorder. That's the perversion of the order. The balance of order is non-order. So, and that's key. So we go into some detail about that, and we talk about some details about that. But we get further, and we give something from the text. We talked about our context saying all that Nyame wa Nyame, the spring being created, is good or in harmony with order. That's cosmological proof right there. No such thing as the spring being creating evil. That's silly. Nyame despises evil. Nyame wa despises evil. Then we go to an ancient text from Kemet. One of the texts, so-called coffin text, 1130 from the so-called 12th dynasty, talking about the 4 good deeds of Ra, the creator. Of course, Ra added the creatress. He says, I made the 4 winds so that every person might breathe in his or her time and place. We're talking about Afurakani people only because we were the only people created. I made every person like his or her fellow. I did not instruct them to do evil. It was their own hearts that caused them to disobey that which I instructed. Meaning, evil does not exist in the world because the Supreme Being created evil. Meaning, well, if you have good, you have to have evil because they bounce. That's idiotic. When the planets were being formed, stars, black substance in space exists. The black bodies that become stars formed out of black substance in space. Ra energy penetrates the stars and so forth, enlivens them, enlightens them, illuminates them. The projectiles released from the stars give birth to planets. Planets are being formed. Ra energy moves through the planets, separating the denser portions from the lighter portions and so forth. Geological formations develop, the oceans, rivers, sun, moon, stars, plant life, mineral life, and so forth. All these things are developing, and we're being fashioned. Where's the evil? You have a creation, millions of years of happening. Where's the evil? You say, well, if you have good, you have to have evil, but you have all this creation. Where's the evil? Did the Supreme Being create evil at that point? That's stupidity coming from the whites and their offspring. And they know it's stupidity, but we pick it up thinking we're being philosophical and Afrocentric or African-centered, and we're repeating the criminality of the whites and their offspring. So, of course, we show cosmologically how idiotic that is, but then we even show the statements in the text from Ra speaking through the people through spirit possession, and they write down what he says through spirit possession. He said, I did not instruct them to do evil. Just like Yaboso Marisha Vodu Ntoru to possess our people today and speak, they've always done that. But when they're talking about writing down from the divinities and what they've said, they possess our people and speak, and then we record what they said. Or they come to us through divination in other forms. So, we go into some more detail about that. Then we talk about the weighing of the heart, what happens when somebody's heart outweighs the feather and so forth, how it's consumed. losing the heart and so forth, all those different things, just proving in different ways the difference between disorder and so forth, and how falsehood is a manifestation of disorder, evil, all these different things. So we want to get down a little bit further. You hear people make these statements, good and evil are two halves of a whole. Good and evil are relative. What's good for one is evil for another. Truth is relative. Right and wrong are relative. There's no absolute good and absolute evil. The only absolute is, quote unquote, God. Good and evil are part of a continuum. We just need to learn how to strike the balance within this continuum. In the African tradition, there's no either or. There's both and totally false. All of that is totally false. 100% inaccurate. These statements are promoted by the whites and their offspring in order that the whites and their offspring may fraudulently place themselves as spirits of disorder into the divine scheme order of creation. The only way they can insert themselves, they are spirits of disorder by nature. They have no kayak, they are spirits of disorder, cancer cells within the body of black humanity. The only way they can stick themselves in the divine scheme and make you accept them cosmologically is to make you believe that good and evil come from the Supreme Being. So you can't seek to eradicate them, because if you want to exterminate them and destroy them, then all of a sudden you're going against the divine plan, because them as spirits of disorder can't be destroyed, because they were actually created as a counterbalance to good in creation, and they have to exist as that counterbalance. That's totally idiotic, and a lot of Negroes have repeated that, and that includes many so-called pan-Africanists, secular nationalists, and so forth, because they have not embraced their ancestral religious culture. They haven't embraced their natural essence as part of the AARU, the ARA community, Ancestral Religious Community. They're in the pseudo-conscious community, and therefore they don't understand their own culture. So constantly misinforming themselves, reinforcing that misinformation, and misinforming others as well. So we clear that up. Now, when we wise up to wage war against the whites and their offspring, we will foolishly believe that we are waging war against one of, quote unquote, God's creations, or a group that was, quote unquote, God allowed to oppress us for a divine reason, or that we were working against the divine continuum, which includes good and evil, or that evil cannot exist without good. Such insane rationalizations fed to us by the Achiwadifo spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, have been embraced and promoted by a percentage of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut on the continent of Afuraka for centuries, specifically after the Greek, Roman, and Arab invasions of Kemet and the Aryan invasion of ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut civilization of Harappa, Black India, as well as some Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut outside the continent. These insane rationalizations were carried by a very small percentage of our people through the Umutsuo Ketia, the Great Perversity, the Enslavement era, and reinforced with the reintroduction of white pseudo-philosophy and pseudo-spiritualism during and in the decades following the end of physical enslavement. They represent the idiocy of conflictual opposites and relativism. So the doctrine of conflictual opposites is a white pseudo-doctrine first heavily promoted by the Greek so-called Pythagorean school of pseudo-philosophers in the quote-unquote West, and the Aryans, the Persians in the so-called East, inclusive of Zoroastrianism and Manichaeism. The doctrine of relativism is a white pseudo-doctrine first heavily promoted by the Greek so-called sophist school of pseudo-philosophers, reprised by the skeptic and cynic schools in the quote-unquote West, and by the Aryan, Hindus, and other Eurasians in the East. The false doctrines of conflictual opposites are perpetuated most effectively today in the pseudo-religions of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, inclusive of their pseudo-esoteric expressions of Gnosticism, some forms of Sufism and Kabbalism, and Marxism. The false doctrine of relativism is perpetuated most effectively today in the university, humanities, in psychology, in various expressions of Hinduism, Vedanta, Asian pseudo-spiritualities, New Age pseudo-spirituality, including some forms of Sufism, hermeticism, etc., and also pseudo-scientific investigation. Those Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut who have been exposed to the false religion and or have been trained in universities and the contemporary white schools of psychology and pseudo-spirituality and science, inclusive of pseudo-Native American pseudo-spirituality, often bring this infection into their practice of quote-unquote African spirituality, culture, and African-centeredness. Today, the aforementioned insane rationalizations rooted in the idiocy of conflictual opposites and relativism, including moral relativism, have infected not only Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, who have embraced pseudo-New Age spirituality, but also a percentage of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, who consider themselves to be Afrocentric, Afri-centric, African-centered, organic African, new African, propounders of the African worldview, practitioners of African traditional religion, quote-unquote initiated priests and priestesses of African traditional religion, Kemetic, holistic, those who live African culture, African nationalists, pan-African nationalists, black revolutionaries, RBG camps, those who have relocated, repatriated to Afurakai, African-centered psychologists, African-centered professors, teachers, African-centered scholars, writers, Afrocentric rites of passage authors, facilitators, and curriculum developers, indigenous Africans, etc. We must understand the gravity of the infection of our amamre, our culture, by the Achiwadifo in order for us to remove this infection. So, we go into some more detail about that aspect of it, but the key is we have carried these foolish infections rooted in this notion of conflictual opposites and relativism into our practice of ancestral culture, into the formulation to remove agency away from the deities, just like the whites and offspring would like us to do. So once you remove agency away from the deities, you begin to promote pseudo-religion, pseudo-culture, pseudo-political ideologies, just as the whites and their offspring have orchestrated you to do, and you denigrate the one power source that you have that undergirds all of our culture, the manifestation of our culture, which is ancestral religion. Ancestral religion animates the culture. Ancestral religion is us being rooted in creation, in reality, living in harmony with the forces that regulate creation, attuning to them, attuning to that order, replicating that order in our lives, being guided directly by these spirits that animate that order and give birth to that order and maintain that order and regulate that order. And then we replicate that in our lives, internally, individually, with our families, our community, and so forth. And when we make mistakes, we can engage ritually to attune to those forces in nature and bring balance to our situation. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. This is what ancestral religion is. It is the foundation of all of our cultural expressions, whether it's scientific invention, innovation, artistic invention, innovation, whether it's food production, preservation, agriculture, military science, military structures, institution building, manufacturing of clothing, building homes on acquired land, establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence. All of the 7 principal values of nation building, ancestry, is undergirded by our culture, our amambre, and what undergirds our culture and animates our culture. Our amambre is our practice of ancestral religion, and our practice of ancestral religion is rooted in Ojida purification, where we can align consciously with the forces that regulate all of creation. We are cells within the great divine body of the supreme being. When we align with our parent organ, the deity, then we're aligning with divine order. We're aligning with the great divine body. So this is what we're talking about when we say this is the ARA community, or the AARU, the Ancestral Religious Community. A full understanding of what Afrocentric, nationalist, and so forth actually really is. With real ancestral religion, spirituality, culture really is. And until we have that understanding, then we're just shooting in the wind and so forth. But when we're grounded in our ancestral religious practice, which is the one thing that the whites in our spring have not wanted us to really understand, that's what changes again. Only people who have been successful with regard to liberation, complete liberation, all we've ever wanted since we've been here, free ourselves from our absolute enemies, eradicate our enemies, and establish sovereign, independent nations, secure in our sovereignty, secured by ourselves. The only people who affected that are those who engaged in ancestral religious practice, waged war against the whites and their offspring in their lifetime, freed themselves from plantations, established independent nations during the enslavement era, and were living free intergenerationally and defending their free settlements militarily against the whites and their offspring, bringing an end to enslavement through waging war against the whites and their offspring. We did a broadcast on the Gullah Wars, which we were fighting the United States Army for over 50 years. The Gullah people, it's not the Seminole Wars, it's the Gullah Wars, and forced the Civil War and forced an end to enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. Those people practicing ancestral religion, empowered and guided by their abosom and insamasa, deities and ancestral spirits, guided them to freedom, independence, sovereignty, and so forth. And that is the standard that we use. We don't utilize the standard of individuals who have had movements that were ineffective and never freed one individual. And the secular nationalist movements rooted in Christianity, Islam, and all these pseudo-doctrines, no matter how much the people revere the leaders of the movements, none of those movements have freed one black person that led to sovereignty for any black person in the past 100+ years. The only movements that led to our sovereignty and independence and the security of that sovereignty are those who engaged ancestral religious practice. So it's the AARU, the Ancestral Religious Community, that led the way to freedom and independence, and it is the AARU, the Ancestral Religious Community, that will do the same today. It is AKYISAN, Ancestral Religious Reversion. And when we engage reversion, then we have laid the foundation and seeded the foundation for our complete sovereignty and security in that sovereignty. We're going to take this call in the chat room. And just so people know, if you have a question or a comment on the phone line, you can hit the number 1 in about 11 minutes or so. Online, if you're just listening online, then it will cut off online. But if you're on the phone line, then you'll be able to listen beyond 11 o'clock. We probably won't go too much longer than 11 o'clock, but just in case we go into overtime, only the people who are already on the phone line will be able to hear beyond 11 o'clock. So if you want to hear beyond 11 o'clock, you have about 10 minutes, 11 minutes to call in. The call-in number is 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have 11 minutes to call in. If you're not able to stay on up to that point or past that point, I say for tuning in. We'll be back on tomorrow for Ojira, and on a Wukuda Wednesday, Akwada for Egua Marketplace. Look at our AKYISAN page, Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference, March 20th here in Washington, D.C. All-day conference. We'll have a number of presenters on various expressions of ancestral religion born of our blood circles. This is the movement, Ancestral Religious Reversion, the ARA community, the AARU. We're bringing that consciousness and reality back, firmly rooted, founded in our ancestral religious culture. You can check that out, check the page out, check out the trailer for the event, the video trailer for the event, check out the flyer and so forth, the details, the different speakers that we have so far, and that list is building. If you'd like to place an ad in the journal that we will be publishing for the event, and will also be online, you'll see the information for that. If you'd like to vend at the event, you can see the vendor's registration application and so forth. And also, when people came in late, we want to say, we thank you for those who came out Miminida Saturday evening to our Kokobo event, eradicating bisexuality, homosexuality in the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community through ancestral religion. So it was a great event. It was here in Washington, D.C. Of course, all of our events are free. We will be having another Kokobo event and other events as well. We did a presentation on our book, Kokobo, The Divine Prohibition Against Bisexuality, Homosexuality in Ancient Kemet, as well as the different texts we translated properly, proving that bisexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in Ancient Kemet. And we also went into the aspect of the information talking about how through ancestral religious practice, our people can overcome that trauma that they suffered as children as well as adults which lead our people, that trauma from physical trauma, physical torture, molestation, all these different things, rape and torture and so forth, as well as the cultural and psychological torture and rape that comes from this white culture that tries to lure our people into these perverse acts. Also, the discarnate spirits of perverted relatives and non-relatives who seek to influence young children as well as adults in their lifetimes on a daily basis. When you repel those spirits through ancestral religion and those perverse desires for dissexuality that you thought were yours were never yours in the first place. They were coming from these perverts who were molesters and rapists when they were alive, and when they died and their spirits separated from their bodies, their spirits are still hanging around. So when you have these overwhelming urges for perverse activities coming from these perverts, when you engage ancestral religion and repel these entities, then those perverse desires disappear automatically and permanently because they were never yours in the first place. Through ancestral religion, our people who were tortured, attacked and so forth, beaten and everything else, physically as children and adults, and were lured into that perverse kind of behavior, they can overcome that through ancestral religion. So we went into some detail about that, gave away a free copy of our book to everybody who came out. Of course, the event is free as well. So Yedase, we thank you for everybody who came out to that event. We'll be scheduling another event, Cocoa Boy event, as well as events on our other publications as well here. And we're also going to be doing some events as we normally do in other cities as well. So if you would like us to come to your city as well, just contact us via the website. Contact information is there. So we're going to take a couple calls on the phone line. Ichiawa on the phone line, number 3429. You had a question or a comment?
Yes. Hotep, brother.
What's up?
Question about ancestral blood circles. I was wondering, suppose I find out that I have a different ancestral blood circle than my wife. How would that work? And would one of them, would one of us adopt the others, or could we live in harmony under the same roof together? And just how would that work?
Okay, that's a good question. So, no, you wouldn't adopt the others. You are exactly who you are. So you're naturally inclined. So say if you were Fula and your wife was Yoruba and so forth, it's no different than if today a Fulani man met a Yoruba woman in America because they were going to school here or something like that, and they decided to get married. She would maintain her Yoruba customs, and he would maintain his Fulani customs. We're talking about Fulani in the sense of traditional, not the ones who brainwashed with Islam. So you are who you are. You're connected to a specific blood circle. You're connected to a specific function. You're to execute in a specific manner. But all ancestral religion at root is in harmony because we all align with the Great Mother and the Great Father through the agency of the deities and the ancestral spirit. So you will have your ancestral shrine in your home. She has her ancestral shrine. And even people who are the same, say if both people are Akan, you still have separate ancestral shrines because you have separate families. Like you wouldn't pour libation to her deceased relatives. You have your own ancestresses and ancestors. She has hers. So whether you're in the same ethnic group or separate, that will still be the case. So there's no disharmony. There are a lot of people who are Yoruba and then they marry an Akan person, or a Akan person marries somebody who's from the Congo and so forth. But there's no conflict because the same deities are the same divinities. We have different expressions or descriptive titles for them in our languages based on, the relationships that we've developed with them as a group over the centuries. But just like there's the same sun that shines on us, the same earth mother that we stand on, earth mother, the fertile earth mother is called Onile in the Yoruba tradition. We call her Asase Afua in the Akan tradition. We're talking about the same female divinity. Or the sun, Oriya in Akan, and Orun in Yoruba, but we're talking about the same entity. So there's no conflict. You have your own ancestral shrine, you deal with things and learn about your language and so forth, and you incorporate that. And then she has her ancestral shrine, and she incorporates that within her practice. And it's no different than physically. If you met somebody from the different, Afurakani ethnic group than you, and you connect, and then you all get married, and your relatives meet her relatives, and they all meet and have a reunion and connect and, learn from one another and talk and laugh and everything else. That's the same thing that the ancestresses and ancestors do. When they make their transition, they're ancestresses and ancestors, and they still communicate and fraternize with one another in a harmonious fashion. So there's no conflict there.
Good to know. I'm happy to hear that. And that was the only question I had tonight, brother. Thank you.
Okay. Made off it. Appreciate the call. Okay. So on phone line number 5251, you had a question or a comment?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Hi. I don't know if my voice is clear. So my question was on ancestral religion. I was listening to your the reversion, the one on reversion that you did, and you were saying something about like as far as somebody that was in jail, that they could still engage in ancestral religion. And I wanted to see if you could possibly clarify in the sense of now, because I remember what you said, that people who engage in criminal activity can they lose their cry or whatever. So, for example, like, let's say somebody was a teenager and committed some crimes, maybe maybe they committed murder or something like that, and then they went to jail, but they were like a teenager or something like that. Could they still engage in ancestral religion because they made a mistake when they was a teenager, or do they become automatically a spirit of disorder and like they lose their cry permanently, or do they suffer in the ancestral realm, and then after they went through their suffering and then they reincarnate, do they have a cry again? And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's one of my questions.
No, it makes sense. So everything that we engage in, it has consequences. But now the next piece is, how are we engaging in certain things? Like, so for example, if somebody is just a deliberately lustful type, malicious type, they have no regard for the life of another Afurakani person or Afuraitkaitnit person, whatever. They know what they're doing is wrong. They're going to do it anyway. They're going against their Akra. Their Akra is leading them in one direction, and they're just repelling that, and they're just going to go and murder somebody. They set those events in motion, and the person who gets killed and their spirit separates from their body, their spirit is still, of course, angry, as well as other people, and their ancestors are angry as well, and those spirits will still be coming after, putting pressure on that person who did the murder and so forth. And so that's coming from the outside, externally, but internally they repelled their own cry. They're deliberately engaged in that. Most of our people who go to jail and stuff like that, they don't go to jail for those kinds of things. Most of our people are selling drugs, or doing something ignorant, they're stealing, or doing, that kind of stuff. The vast majority of our people who get caught up, they're not engaged in the most egregious type crime. Those things that they're doing, stealing or robbing from somebody, they may have beaten somebody up or something like that, they're going to get that back. They're setting things in motion. Somebody's going to end up attacking them. They're setting up a magnetism towards the kind of individuals or entities that will be drawn to them to return that kind of energy upon them. And they will suffer the consequences of that. But then when they suffer the consequences of that, now they have an opportunity to say, wait a minute, I'm going to make another decision. As you were saying, I'm going to move in a different direction. And they can do that. They can move in a different direction. Sometimes they'll decide to make that move in a different direction before they suffer the consequences. So maybe they went to jail because they beat up somebody they shouldn't have, they were just, in a gang or something like that, and they just was riding on somebody and just beat somebody down because they were in a gang or whatever. They got caught up, and then they realized how foolish they were and all that other stuff. They changed their mindset. They changed their life around, and get involved in culture, and then they get out of jail in a few years and things like that. Part of the punishment, quote unquote punishment, was the jail sentence. But at some point, one of those ancestral spirits, one of those people that they attacked, or somehow somebody's going to end up coming after them, they're going to suffer the consequences of that. And when they suffer the consequences of it, they're going to recognize that this was the consequence. So they're not going to be mad at the deities because they said, oh, I changed my life around. Why am I getting hit like this? They're going to know what's happening, and they're going to recognize it and accept it, and it's not going to be a problem. So there are different nuances with it. Now, when it comes to certain things like child molesters, rapists, things like that, the Kra has separated totally. So the deities are not, they can sit around and do rituals all day. You raped a child or something, there's no turning around. They deserve to be exterminated. The only reason they're in jail is because the whites and their offspring are seeking to preserve their lives, because the whites and their offspring want them to get back on the street so that they can come back in our community and violate other children. The whites and their offspring love child molestation. They want that to be rampant in our community. This is why they direct, child molesters. They'll send them to therapists. They'll get a little bit of jail time. They send them to a therapist and tell them to take medication, things like that. But once they get out of that court-ordered, therapy as part of their probation, then they can continue doing what they're doing. The jail time is not designed to reform them. The jail time is designed to hold them in a specific pattern so that they can be ultimately released to wreak havoc back on our community. That's not the traditional approach to child molesters and rapists and all of that. The traditional approach in our community for thousands of years, even up until us living here in this, country, just up until a couple of decades ago, is somebody molested a child, people in the family kill the molester. They don't call the police and do all of that. And still people who have that understanding of justice, they will kill, torture, and then kill the molester. And everybody will know exactly what went down. Nobody's going to, of course, tell the police and all of that. They're going to destroy them, kill them, torture them, kill them, and set an example for anybody else who's even thinking about being molested. They will be tortured and killed. And that greatly reduces the incidence down to, less than 1%, so forth, when you have that kind of swift justice. So it's very nuanced. But the most egregious type crime, you get involved in ancestral religion and you can get back on track. You deserve to be exterminated by the community. That's what's necessary. The whites and offspring are simply trying to save these criminals so they can come back and wreak havoc on the community. They don't get that pass. So if somebody was doing something ignorant, which is the vast 99+% of our people who get caught up, selling drugs or in possession or stealing or, just doing a bunch of negative things, ignorant things, those people can turn themselves around. But they are going to suffer the consequences for the things that they did. No matter whether they turn themselves around or not, they're going to suffer the consequences for that.
Right. Does that include, like teenagers, though? Like, you might hear stories of certain teenagers that might have committed, like they were in a gang or something, when they shot somebody and that person died or something like that. Does that include, like, teenagers, or doesn't matter what age the person committed? You see what I'm saying? Like, or
right. Well, no, I understand. So now, but you also have to look at it when we talk about teenagers. Look at it from the straight, real perspective. Every person walking around is an ancestral spirit who has returned. So are they really a teenager or not? They've really been here. They're thousands of years old. So there's something inside of them that knows, right from wrong, and would they want to get shot? No, they wouldn't. So, you know what I'm saying? So they know exactly what they're doing. Now, sometimes what's happening with them is they end up hitting somebody who murdered somebody else. And they're drawn to a certain extent because of what's taking place, in different ways, and they're pushed and pulled energetic-wise towards, are they going to go after one particular person, or they're drawn more so to go after somebody else. And that somebody else may have been a racist or something like that. It's very nuanced. It depends on what's going on. They weren't drawn particularly, like the deity said, okay, come and do this drive-by, and, we're going to go hit a rapist tonight. It may not have been that kind of thing, but they may have been leaning towards, hey, in order to get into this gang, I got to kill somebody. And they were going to go after one particular person, but they felt like they should not. Then they got near another person, and they felt something else. They felt some perverse negative energy, and maybe that person was a child molester. They didn't know that, but they just went ahead and took them out. They took out a child molester. Now, was it good for them to be a quote-unquote murderer? No, it's not. But they took out a criminal, no problem. But they still have to, transform themselves. But now if they took out somebody who was, an upstanding person in the Afuraitkaitnit community, they're going to suffer the consequences. And typically, if they're not protected or preserved by the cracker, they're going to suffer those consequences once they get out by one of our people. Even if they turn themselves around and try to live a good life from that point on, well, that'll be a benefit from that point on to the, for the next few years or whatever for the community, because they're no longer engaged in crime, but they're still going to catch up with them. So people will say, well, he turned his life around, he got out of jail, he started doing the right thing, and then 10 years later he started a business and got married and everything, and then he got shot in the drive-by. Well, they caught up with him. Now that 10 years of good work, that helped the community. But he still got caught up because whoever he killed, that discarnate spirit be putting pressure on other discarnate spirits and other people who are still living, and it will set up and orchestrate a series of events that lead one person to the position where he is, and he gets caught up and return that, same thing that he did to the other person. So he gets put in the same position that he put somebody else. In the meantime, however, for the larger community, the 10 years of good work that he did was good. And then when people see that he gets taken out, that just punctuates the reality that we need to be raising our people based on ancestral religion so they never get in that situation where that can happen, where he never should have went to jail in the first place and got out, did 10 years of good work, and got murdered in the second place, in the second regard. So that just punctuates the reality, as we say, death wakes up those who sleep through life. When death occurs and we wake up out of this coma we are in and realize, we start recognizing what is the value of life, what should we be doing, are we doing enough to raise our community properly, should we put things in place, is the culture maintaining the people, do we need to expand the culture and so forth. So it's very nuanced and dynamics are, complex, but it's still, things are unfolding and orchestrated by order.
Right. So when those types of people that commit those heinous crimes get executed, right, when they cry separates totally and then they get executed, when they reincarnate, is their cry still permanently attached after they got, like what happens to those people? Like, do they become a permanent spirit of disorder even after their execution, and then they're in the spirit world, and then if they was to reincarnate, they don't get any other chances or whatever?
Okay, so and what the caller's talking about, when you're engaged in some just general kind of negative behavior, perverse behavior, repulsive behavior, you cause your cry to be repelled. Now, if it's just basic ignorant things, self-destructive things, whether it's drug use or things like that, or somebody stealing, your cry can be repelled. It can be detached. It can detach from your head. And then in our common culture, they'll say, his cry has fled from him. And rituals will be engaged in to draw the cry to come back and reinstall itself in the head, or in Vodun, they say the soul has separated from the person. Or in Yoruba, they say the orrery has separated from the person. They engage in ritual practice to draw the orrery back, or the Selido back, and so forth. Even if you're just disobeying the cry, because you're engaged in lustful activity, promiscuity or something like that, and your cry is leading you to be, normal and virtuous or whatever, and you're just acting crazy. So it makes you repulsive. Sometimes sickness develops when you're repelling your cry. It's still connected to you. It hasn't totally separated, but it's dislodged, it's disaligned. So anytime we engage in disorder, we have some disalignment. Now, when somebody goes crazy and just, doing something, murderous and raping and child molestation, the cross separates from the individual, but it doesn't just separate and is still in the vicinity. It separates and returns to Inyamewa and Inyame and becomes dissolved back into the great Kankai deities that govern the black substance of space, just like a drop of water returning to the ocean. You'll never find that drop of water again. So now these people are Kra-less. They are spirits without a Kra, meaning they are spirits that don't have an anchor in divine order, meaning they are spirits of disorder. They are spirits of disorder in a black body. And when they make their transition, they're still spirits of disorder, and their Kra has gone. And those are the kind of spirits that come back when they reincarnate. They're drawn into a womb space in a certain condition, and they grow up, and they're still manifesting that kind of disorder. When we have a culture in place and people are engaged in culture, that includes people who grow up and get married and so forth. And when they're connecting with their abosom on a regular basis and unsamampo, the womb space will repel those kind of spirits, and they will never be able to come through somebody who's engaged in culture. But people who are not engaged in culture and engaged in some low-level kind of activity, white culture and so forth, or engaged in some dissexuality, some nonsense like that, then they make their spiritual pores, quote-unquote, become open, and they are receptive to those kind of negative spirits, and they will come back through the womb, and they'll give birth to a spirit of disorder in black skin, and then wonder why that person grows up, and no matter how well you raise them, they still are drawn to disorder and criminal-type activity and so forth, and then you try to find out what's going on. Those are the kind of things that happen, and it forces us, once again, it punctuates the fact that when people see these things taking place, taking shape, that we really need to be rooted in our culture so that we can handle these different kinds of, happening. But if somebody really engaged in that kind of criminality, when the cross separates for good, then it's like a drop of water returning to the ocean. It's gone. Now you have a spirit of disorder, and that they will reincarnate as a spirit of disorder. But that's not the vast majority of our people. The vast majority of our people engage in, silly, self-destructive behavior. They just injure themselves. They're self-injurious. They injure themselves, and at some point they get tired of being self-destructive, and they start thinking, I need to do something different with my life. Then they come in contact with, the AARU community, Ancestral Religious Community, and they get involved in their own ancestral religion, ancestrally inherited tradition. They get back in harmony with order, and then they get things back together. Bumps and bruises and scars from the self-destructive acts they engaged in, but then they can use that as a teaching tool for other people to help them avoid that.
Right, okay. Yeah, so that answers that question. I appreciate that. So now I'm fully clarifying that. My last question I just got to ask about the ancestral languages. Now, if you're from a specific clan, but you speak another language clan, like let's say you're Fan, you're from the Fan, but you don't know you're Fan, and you learned the Ewe language, and you're fluent in that, and you go to the shrine and try to call the ancestors in the Ewe language, but they're Fan. Now, could you temporarily speak a different clan's language until you learn what clan you're from, so you can learn that language? Would the ancestors and ancestors respond or to your prayers or whatever if you're speaking in a different African language from your specific clan, but you're trying to, until you, like, would they give you a pass, or is that considered disorder too, even though it's an African language? It's not from the specific clan, but would they respond and help you out until you can find and speak the actual clan's language you're from?
Well, there's a couple of things that would happen. Number one, we always recommend that if people don't know exactly what group they're from, you can utilize the language of ancient Kanat and Kemet, because that's the parent language, and their ancestresses and ancestors of ancient Kanat and Kemet who haven't reincarnated since. Part of their responsibility is to help direct us to and show us what our clan is. So if you don't know what your specific clan is, then you can utilize that parent language, because that will, get you to the right place. Now, if you say maybe somebody thought that they were Fawn, whatever, or maybe they just happened to learn that language in school and they were drawn to it, and that's the only language they knew, and they went to the shrine. There's a couple of things that will happen. Number one, that you're speaking the Fon language and you're really Bakongo, but you learn Fon and you're using that language. First thing that can happen is if you're ancestrally Bakongo, and of course, but we're over here, so even though you are a Bakongo spirit in the previous lifetime and you reincarnated now, even though all the mixture took place on the boat, as we said before, the same Congo spirit who has returned, you may have a blood mixture with other groups because of what happened during enslavement for hundreds of years, and that's in your blood circle, your DNA, but you're the same Congo spirit operating through a mixed brown body. So your ancestral language really is Kikongo. But if you learn Fon, the first thing that would happen is those relatives in your blood circle that are connected only by blood who happen to be Fon, they'll respond to that. Your direct ancestry, the Congo spirits that you used to live with as a part of the Congo tradition in the Congo, they won't understand that language, but through enslavement, some of them married some Fon people maybe in the 1800s, or maybe, their children married some Yoruba people, and their children married some Akan people, and their children married somebody somewhere in your language, in the blood circle will be Fon, more than likely. They'll respond. They may come forward and give you some direction, but they may not be your direct ancestors as an ancestor. So you'll have some communication for those who speak that language. But the key is those of your people who are actually Congo, and that's your real ancestral language, they won't understand the Fon, but if they see the sincerity in which you're trying to connect with them, they're going to assist you anyway and direct you towards the Congo tradition. It is no different in that regard than when you have children, and when your children first begin to talk, they can't speak the language. So they just speak baby talk. And you don't know what they're saying, but you try to attune to beyond the sounds that they're making. You try to attune to what they need and what they're trying to get to, and you serve that until you can teach them how to speak the language that you speak so they can speak it clearly and tell you exactly what they need, what they want, if they're in pain or whatever. So when they hear us speaking English or a different language and they don't understand that language, it's just like baby talk to them. Just like, babies just making sound. But they attune to your spirit and what you desire and the things that are generated in your mind, the images of what you're yearning for, and they address that. No different than if somebody was deaf, but they were pouring libation and trying to attune to their ancestors and ancestors. They can't speak, but they generate in their mind the things that they desire, what they need, what's going wrong, if they're in pain, and then the ancestors and ancestors attune to that yearning, what they need, and they attend to it. So that's what will happen.
Okay. That clarifies all my questions. I appreciate it.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Bye.
We've got a couple more calls on the phone line. Michio on the phone line, number 8162. You had a question or a comment?
Michio, Brother Quasi.
Michio, what's up?
I had two questions. I've been listening to you for a while, and you always talk about aligning our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And I'm not totally sure if I quite understand what you mean by thoughts, intentions, and actions, and I was hoping if maybe you could speak on that a little bit.
So that's simply meaning it's just straightforward. So as you get up and operate throughout the course of the day, the more consistent you are with regard to dealing with your craft, your soul. Like Yoruba people will have a shrine for their Ori, the Ori shrine. Akan people, they're engaged properly in the culture, will have a shrine for their Okra. Yoruba Vodun, people who practice Vodun have the shrine for the Say, the soul, divine consciousness. The Igbo will have a shrine for the Chi. So consistently meditating with that divinity at the shrine, and of course throughout the course of the day, that force in your head will be drawing you towards certain thoughts, intentions, and actions. And you'll have a repulsion for others. So if you're going to work or you're going to school, going to the store, whatever it is, you're just going throughout the course of your everyday life. If you're about to make a decision and it's out of harmony with order, you'll feel a pull in the head region that's repulsive, that you shouldn't be engaged in that. Or you're about to say something that you shouldn't be saying, or talk about something you shouldn't be talking about, or whatever. You'll feel that repulsion because you have a relationship with your cry to the point that the only things that you have a desire to really do is in harmony with order. If you have a repulsion for what you're about to say or what you're about to do, or certain things you're thinking about, doing later, and you reject the repulsion and do it anyway, then you're going against your own cry. So now your thoughts and your intentions and then your actions are out of harmony with order because you're going against the pull in your head. But if you desire you're going to go and engage in some kind of activity or business or, interaction with somebody else or having some kind of conversation or whatever about certain things, and your cry is in alignment with that and you don't feel any repulsion because it's open to do that, then your thoughts, intentions, and actions are in harmony with order. So that's what we're talking about.
Okay. Madase. My other question was, there was a broadcast that you did a while back where you went into detail about the Akutu, and you used as a reference Kajara Nyaya Nebehet's introduction that you included in her book. I wanted to listen to it again, but I couldn't remember what the name of the show was.
You said I listed. Okay, I did an afterword in the book, but what was the specific? Was it specifically referenced?
The Aku and the Akutu.
But I mean, were we talking about setting up an ancestral shrine, or what were we talking about?
No, I think you touched on ancestral shrines in it, but you were going into the etymology of the word Aku, Akutu, and contacting them and just speaking on the Shining One.
Oh, okay. More than likely, it was the broadcast called Religion is Spirituality, the Etymology of Religion and Spirit. It's probably that one.
Okay.
Because that's the one. The image on the front is the Rekitu, and
right. My bad.
Okay, that's it. The Religion is Spirituality, the Etymology of Religion and Spirit. That's the one you're looking at.
Okay. Medase.
Okay. Inyase. Okay. So we have one more call on the phone line. Maybe Chiavo on the phone line, number 3003. You got a question or a comment? 3003.
You can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. I'm kind of new to all this, Before I discovered this culture, my culture, I was involved with something called Moorish science.
Right.
And, it kind of gave me the foundation to help me better understand everything that you've been speaking on. I've been on the website. I just recently signed up for this last night, and I see that you got this blog talk going on, so I kind of got into it. But my first question, I unfortunately have a daughter with a European female. What's the significance of that? Because I'm currently right now in a custody battle with the mother, because I'm trying to get my kid. I'm trying to raise my kid properly. I have two other kids of Asiatic descent. Me and the mother both are Asiatic. I'm just trying to get my family together and raise them properly and realigning myself with what's proper to me. Not none of the pseudo-religions, Islam, Christianity, and all of that. I'm trying to get back to what's natural and what's best for me. What's the significance? Should I further this with this custody battle? Because I really do understand that Europeans have no soul. But this is my daughter. I did father this child. Do I go further with that? I'm just so lost.
No, I understand. So, and that's an important question because a lot of people have that kind of situation. So, Now, there's one particular broadcast where we go into a lot of detail. One of them is called Bebrasem, the Ramifications of Reincarnation. So you'll see that on the YouTube page as well. We did it a few months back. So it's called Bebrasem, the Ramifications of Reincarnation. We go in detail about this whole notion of reincarnation. And what you're talking about goes to the key of identity. So it's not just about, the DNA, or some people will say, well, you are what your father is, or, like in Islam they'll say that, or,
right.
Then you have other people who talking about the black woman is God, so you are what your mother is, right?
Right.
It's not that. You know what I'm saying? What it is when two people come together. So you coming together with whoever you would have, gotten with before you even met them, as you were growing up as a young man, since you were a baby, you have ancestresses and ancestors, right? Who lived before you. They're part of your blood circle. Whoever you come in contact with, they have ancestresses and ancestors as well. So when you copulate with somebody, the spirit that enters in the womb is either one of yours that gets drawn, sucked into that womb, or is one of hers that gets sucked into the womb. If it's one of yours, say it was your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, the last time she was here was in 1750. And now this is the first time she's reincarnating, so she's drawn because she's connected to you. Whoever you would have gotten with, she would have been drawn in because she was ready to come back. You got with the European, who gets drawn to a European womb, and she pops out light brown. If you would have got with somebody who's 100% black, she would have been drawn to the womb, she would have popped out dark brown. But it's still your great-great-great-grandmother.
Yeah, for her mother to be her mother's European, but she has all the phenotypes of me. She has the red brown hair like I do. She has the pretty brown eyes. She has the light skin. When I look at this little girl, she has me in her, and I'm just I'm on the fence about it because I'm going through so much with it. I just want to get myself together. I don't want to make any wrong choices. I want to do what is right.
No, I understand. So, and it sounds the way you talk about it, more than likely, she's one of your people. Because I was going to say the other possibility is, of course, it was one of the ancestresses of the cracker, and so she just drove them through, and then she popped out light brown. But it was still, even if the light brown is not going to make them Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit African, they're still one of the people. But the way you're talking about it, the feeling I get, and it sounds like the feeling that you've been led to, is that she's actually one of your people, and that's why you're really fighting for her, because this is one of your ancestresses that you're trying to get custody of from the European. So yes, you continue to move on that because that's one of your people. So identity is based on the reincarnation of an ancestral spirit. That's what determines real identity. Some of us get stuck through because of violence in the ancestral blood circles, and we pop out lighter brown because that's what happens. Just like if you get cut on your arm because you were outside in a certain area, the cut, every time you see the cut, it reminds you of the violence that took place. You remember, like, I remember that day where I was at when I got that cut. It's the same thing when you see people with light brown skin. It's an indication of the violence that took place within our blood circles because of enslavement, because of living in this society. So when we're born like that, when we come out, the entire light brown skin wrapped around our bones is a scar in and of itself, which represents what we've been through for hundreds of years. But the spirit that animates that physical body, that's what determines the identity. And most likely the way you expressed it is one of your people, and that's why you have that strong desire for that whole custody. So you move forward with that and do your thing.
All right, so to move on to my second question, as I stated before, I've subscribed to the teachings, the doctrines. I'm not a part of the temple, but I watch the lessons, and, it has given me a foundation, whereas when I first came into the NANASOM, I couldn't understand it because I didn't have a certain knowledge. But as I went further with the more science teaching, I came back into NanaSom, and now I understand it a lot more and a lot better, and I'm ready to go forward with NanaSom and shed, I would say, the foundation of the more science. It's more science, something that's not natural to our kind, our people, because it is a form of Islam. They call it Islamism, the science of peace, and universal knowledge. Knowledge of the universe, the stars, the planets, the great God, as they would say, Allah, Allah, the law, as they would say. Is that, something to let go as a pseudo-religion or pseudo-belief?
Yeah, it is pseudo. So, and the reason why, of course, they're going to incorporate things from our tradition. So when the whites and offspring invaded culture and started destroying, trying to create a perverse philosophies, this is the birth of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, Gnosticism, Sufism, Kabbalism, all of that. They're all just expressions of the same attack on ancestral religion. What they did was they took fragments of our culture and then, perverted those fragments and then represented those fragments as the real thing. They couldn't just create something totally new because nobody would embrace it. They had to take from what we already had, pervert that, fragments of it. Like take 99% of it, don't even deal with it. So less than 1% that they took, like writings from ancient Kemet and so forth, corrupt that little 1% and then present that as a whole tradition. So that's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Mooricism, all of that. Hinduism, Buddhism, that was all of it. So, so for example, when they talk about Islam and, Muhammad and so forth, they're not going to teach, except some of them who got a little information from our publication, the Cuckoo Tumtum. Like you have a couple of people who are involved in that. They read our book, the Cuckoo Tumtum. They recognized that we destroyed that information they had, so they tried to incorporate it and pretend like they already had it all along. But it really destroyed it. So, for example, there was nobody named Muhammad. He didn't exist at all. There was no black Muhammad. There was no white Muhammad. There was no Muhammad, period. The divinity that operates through the northern Nile is called Hap-Met, which is the northern Nile. Hap-Reset is the southern Nile. So you see those two twin divinities in ancient Kemet, the spirits that animate the river. You pour libation in the river, that deity communicates, possesses people, just like you go to a river somewhere else, and the Orisha of the river, the Abosom, the Vodou of the river, possesses people. Hapi is the deity. Hap-Met is the northern Nile divinity. Hap-Reset is the southern Nile divinity. The word for water in ancient Kemet is Mu. Muhammad is literally Mu, the waters of Hap-Met, the northern Nile. Muhammad is where they get Muhammad from. He is a spirit that animates the northern Nile. Now,
because I see.
They're not going to
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, what were you going to say?
Yeah, because I see the correlation. Because I've been listening to the blog talk since about 10:30. I actually tuned in and I made the phone call when you said we had 10 minutes, and I caught a couple of your phone conversations. Like Ma'at and Moab. I see the correlation with the words. I'm not good with linguistics and dialect, but I have a pretty sharp mind for words. And I can see the correlation with the words and how they've been transliterated and translated through the years from our original language and dialect to the Indo-European that we speak now. And so, and this is why I'm so drawn to this, because I see something original here, and I don't see a copy of anything. I see originality, right. and it's pulling me, and I'm just on the fence because the knowledge that I have now, I've been completely alienated from my earthly family, my grandma, my brothers, my mom. Like, they don't want anything to do with me because I walk a certain way, I talk a certain way, and I don't get involved with their feelings, I would say. They live a life based on feelings and what everybody else is doing, and I walk my own tune and I walk my own line, and it's just it's eating at me because I'm kind of lonely. I hate to use that word, being a man, but it's kind of I'm in a place of solitude right now. All I have is my woman and my children, And, you know, as I said, I'm trying to teach my children something better, but I see that a lot of these things that's been presented to me, Christianity, Islam, more science, nationality, all of that, that's just a figment of a European's imagination to keep you entrapped, enslaved, and following what they want you to do. So, I mean,
right.
Yeah,
no, that's true. And the thing is, once you continue on that track, getting back involved in your ancestral culture, one of the benefits of that, one of the residual benefits, even when people are resistant at first, this is your ancestral culture, their ancestral culture as well. They're your relatives. They're related to you. So when you communicate with your ancestors and ancestors, they begin to put that same pressure on your other relatives because you share the same ancestors and ancestors, and they will see that what you're doing is correct. So we have one of our books that we published. You can download the whole book for free. All of our 17 books are free downloads. One of them is called More Means Dead. And we go into detail, etymologically and cosmologically, proving that term more actually means dead. So when they say, you know, black means death, which is totally inaccurate, or if they say that Negroes refer to death and they don't use the term death, well, actually the term more, it does come from ancient Kemet, mer, it's spelled in the Medusa, but that's a term we use for physically, for those who were dead, and specifically the disordered dead, the deceased that were the damned, the Mur people, Meru, plural, and then those who are alive were called murder because they were slaves, afflicted, vassals, servants. They were socially dead. So the socially dead were murdered. The physically dead who were the damned were murder or Meru, plural. So we prove that and show the total etymological breakdown. More of a look in the etymological dictionary, and they'll go back to the Proto-Indo-European root and stop right there. We show where the Proto-Indo-European roots come from in the language of Kemet, and we show that more means dead, and we go into detail about how they manufactured that pseudo-philosophy. So we go into detail about that, so you can download that. And we also did a broadcast where we went through the entire book, point by point, and the name of the broadcast is More Means Dead as well. So when you check that out, you'll see the detail.
All right. One more question, brother, and I'm going to let you get back to your good work. But, so how can I put it? My best option, my only option, the right option, the truthful option for me to go is here with my nanasom, right?
Right, this is your birthright. This is no different than, it's like imagine a giraffe or an elephant or, you know, a whale. They're giraffe-centric, elephocentric, and whale-centric because that's who they are. If they were to do anything else, they would be operating outside of who they are. If somebody tried to tell them, well, don't operate according to giraffe culture, you need to do something else, then they're going to cause problems for themselves. Whites and Offspring never wanted us to embrace our ancestral culture, who we incarnated and reincarnated in the world to be, and reject what the Supreme Being fashioned us to be. So it's no other culture other than the culture that's born of your blood circle, that's wired within your spirit, in your cry, in your moja, in your soul, and in your blood. So that's who we are.
Oh, man. All right, brother. I really appreciate the clarifications, and I appreciate the guidance. And, Coach, I will be tuning in regularly and calling in and keeping the questions coming and moving forward.
Okay, and I appreciate it, man. I'll say, and just check that out. Go to the publications page on the website, and then you can download the book for free. And then you'll see the way we list the books, starting with Kuku Tuntun, the Ancestral Jurisdiction. And in that one, we show that Jesus and Moses, Muhammad and Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael and Solomon, Sheba, Menelik and Buddha and Brahman, all those characters don't exist, and we prove that. All that stuff, Bilal as well, Allah as well, Yahweh. So all those books are free downloads, and we have them in order from the beginning. So you start with the Kuku Tuntun, Uben Sheng, but you'll see as you look through them, one of them, you'll see the More Means Dead book as well. So we have them in that curriculum format from the beginning for people who are just starting. But sometimes people just see the YouTube page, and they'll just go straight to a video, and there's a bunch of videos out there. But we have that curriculum in place. So, just like you said, you may have certain things. You may have listened to a broadcast that was focused on something more complex and specific. that wasn't introductory. And been like, oh, wait a minute.
Oh, okay.
I never heard about this before. You know what I'm saying? So.
Right. All right, and like I said, continue forward, and I appreciate the help, brother.
Okay, may I say, appreciate the call. I want to make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room. Okay, so yet I say to everyone who's tuned in to the broadcast, we will be back on tomorrow for Ojida and the following day for Egua Marketplace. Remember the AKYISAN conference, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religious Reversion conference in Washington, D.C. We're hosting that March 20th, which is a Sunday, from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., free event. We will have vendors, we will have presentations, a lot of good information. It's on the AKYISAN page on the website. So it just goes to the AKYISAN page. We also have an AKYISAN Facebook page as well. So connect with us on Facebook, Kwesiakan, or Ojidafo on Facebook, Ojidafo on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can also follow us on this page, and when you follow us on this page, click the follow button. Then when we send out notifications about events coming up and so forth, you'll automatically be, notified, as well as broadcast, when they're coming up and stuff like that. So, and also if you, as we mentioned with the brother, all 17 of our books are free downloads. And we also have like 70 plus articles. You can download those for free. We have about 200 videos you can download, videos of these broadcasts and others. 17 books are free downloads. The ebook versions are free downloads, of course. The softcover versions, we do sell the softcover versions. They range between $8 and $11. We also have discounts. For example, the first 5 books is $40. That's a 20% discount. Any book order automatically 30% off. So, for example, the first 10 books, including The Mormon Dead and The Fukutuntun, showing Jesus and Muhammad and all those characters don't exist, and The Cosmological Foundation of Creation, talking about Amen and Amenet and Ra and Ra'ed and Khan, Ka'ed and Ma'al and Ma'ad and so forth. The first 10 books are $66. That's 30% off. And any order of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. So you can go to the Homa page on our website for that. And yet I'll say we thank you for the support and thank you for those who have purchased the book that assist us with what we're doing. We do not charge fees for any presentations that we do in different cities. We don't charge an admissions fee. We also do not charge organizers a speaker's fee to bring us out. And whenever we have an event, we give away a free copy of one of our books to everyone who comes out. So you come to a free event, you walk away with a free copy of one of our books. Whether you have money or not, that's not the key. We want to get the information out. If you want to support the work that we are doing so we can expand that kind of work, please support the softcover book and so forth. So, again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast. And Yebeshiabio, we will meet again. That's up.